Can you reach out and touch him?
I'll scoot it. We're good.
There you go.
So my master volume
I turn my master volume off.
off.
Yeah.
Join with a video.
Maybe I can turn my microphone off through my computer too.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, so
So I'm going to do it without,
connect. Yep.
but I don't want to join with
Correct.
computer audio.
You should just X out of that box
Yeah, okay.
and then continue.
Great. Thank you. Right, there everybody is.
Plug in too. Pop. Sorry.
Don't go to the microphone. Stay here.
Is everybody ready?
When you want to talk, I don't know what you need to do.
When I present.
Sorry.
The alarm's going off.
Time for city council.
Yes, you're outside the front door. Okay, just a minute. There's no city attorney outside the front door.
Uh-oh.
I go let him in.
You got it? Thanks, Luke.
Thank you, Luke.
We'll wait for Jim to come in.
Yeah, turn off the old phone now.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and call to order. If I can get organized and in order myself here. So this is the City Council, Norwalk City Council business meeting for Thursday, February 17th, 2021. It is actually 6:02 p.m. Lindsay, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Lester? You're muted.
Here.
Baker?
Here.
Riva?
Here.
Cool?
Here.
Livingston?
Here.
Mayor Tom Phillips?
I am here as well, so we do have a quorum, so we will move on. So this meeting of the Norwalk City Council on February 17th, 2021 is being held both in person and electronically. Governor Reynolds issued a state of public health disaster effective, hang on a second, let me start my video. Forgot to do that too. Effective January 7th, 2021, that lifted the prohibition on indoor gatherings of more than 10 people, as long as physical distancing is possible. I issued a proclamation of emergency effective January 15th, 2020 that reopened our public buildings, but to provide proper physical distancing, only those presenting to council are welcome to attend in person. Everyone else is welcome to attend the meeting electronically. As with all electronic meetings, there may be some technical glitches. We may talk over each other, and there could be a bunch of other issues that occurred during our meeting tonight.
No, that's Robbins.
And my mic was off. I'm not gonna get on. Sorry.
Well, wait,
It's off.
I do.
Of course it is.
all right. So technical issues, yes. I just ask we all be patient and respectful with each other as we conduct this meeting. For those on the Zoom meeting, you'll notice that your microphones are muted. If you wanted to speak to an agenda item, go ahead and unmute your mic and speak up during public comment. You can also let us know you have some input by raising your Zoom hand or by flagging us in the chat box. We'll then recognize you during public comment. We ask that you mute your microphone after you've made your comments. Just know that if you don't mute your microphone, one of us will probably go ahead and get your mic muted for you, which is not a problem. You'll also notice that you needed to be allowed into the Zoom meeting tonight. If you are disruptive, we will give you a warning and ask you to stop. If you're still disruptive, we'll remove you from this meeting and you will not be allowed back in. This is what would happen with a full in-person meeting, so it's not really a change to our procedures. We are streaming this meeting through YouTube. We believe YouTube provides the ability for a much broader audience to view our meetings. You'll find the ability to comment to the YouTube meeting has been turned off. This is done so we don't have a meeting going on within a meeting. We're recording this meeting, so please act accordingly. Finally, I'm only human and I may miss recognizing someone. If that happens, please interrupt me via the chat box or unmute your microphone and yell. I'm not going to be offended at all if you do so. All that said, item number 2 on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please rise and say Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
Much allegiance.
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. That's all right. Technical problems, right? Technical issue, we didn't have the flag up tonight. So item number 3 is approval of the agenda. Would anybody like to move any of the consent agenda items to the regular agenda? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion. Second.
All right, I got a motion by Livingston, second by Cool. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, same. And that motion carries. All right, item number 4 is welcome guests and public comment. So this would be for non-agenda items. We'll give you a 3-minute time limit. We can't take action on these items tonight since they aren't on the agenda. Also, if you'd like to comment on any item in the consent agenda, now would be the time. So anybody like to address council for a non-agenda item? Hearing none, we will move on to presentations. First off, we have someone here for Central Iowa Water Trails presentation. So,
Yes, hi. My name is Hannah Inman. I'm with the Great Outdoors Foundation. We are one of the organizations that is helping launch the new entity for Central Iowa Water Trails, and we are also the fundraising organization. I'm here with Nikki Severson from Isaacson Severson Consulting. Nikki, along with Scott Radker with Character Counts, has been spearheading and leading our governance process, which is what we're going to talk to you about today. We're going to give you a short presentation. The first part is about the 28E, and then we'll take a pause and answer questions during that time. As you guys know, sometimes in this virtual environment, it's difficult to get questions in during the presentation because we can't see the room. So we'll pause during that time to answer questions about the 28E, and then we'll continue in and have a discussion about the board and the board makeup. And then at the end of that, pause for questions with that one. So we really appreciate your time. And just to remind everybody where we're at, let's remember how we got to this part. In 2016, the MPO adopted a regional water trails plan that then led to an engineering study to determine how we could use conservation and recreation to activate our waterways for residents and visitors alike. The study identified 86 amenities over 150 miles throughout a 3-county region. And there's varying levels of amenities, some as simple as creek walking and access to your local creek, all the way up to fishing, wading, or whitewater rafting and kayaking. Beginning in 2016 and continuing today, this effort has been a collaborative community effort with input and dozens of discussion groups, town halls, and presentations. And throughout every step of the process, there's been participation from elected officials, city staff, and a multitude of community groups and interested residents. Throughout each of these conversations, the vision is clear. We have an opportunity to activate our waterways as a regional amenity to improve our environment, enhance quality of life, spur economic development, and attract workforce and development. So when we look at this region, and you see this map, this shows the collection of these sites among our 3-county region. So why is this important, especially given all that cities are confronted with now? We've seen with our bike trails, what our bike trails have done for our community and how it's activated different economic development, provided great quality of life. However, though, these were started as grassroots by each community, and sometimes our maintenance is not consistent. The long-term maintenance is still a question that we're grappling with, and the user experience isn't necessarily uniform. Additionally, we lack as a region, even though we have probably one of the best products nationwide of paved bike trails, of being able to compete to attract different residents and visitors to our bike trail system because there isn't a regional entity to provide marketing. So when we look at the water trails, because of how water flows, it's even more critical that we create this universal experience for our residents and visitors alike. And we must be thinking about consistent long-term maintenance and operation. So when we look at what the benefits are, we have our overall goals. First of all, safety, and certainly in those 3 low-head dams, we've had 19 deaths since the inception, but there's another level of safety here. Paddle sports and moving water recreation is the fastest growing segment of outdoor recreation. And that is true even for central Iowa. If anyone tried to buy a kayak, a canoe, or a fishing pole, it was virtually impossible to do so in the last 8 months. And so we see record numbers of people accessing our waterways, but because we're not Colorado with these rocky shorelines, we need to provide a holistic way for people to go on and off. And because of the lack of this holistic way to do that, we've seen an uptick in rescues on our waterways. Additionally, economic development, we did an economic impact study, and in direct spending alone, this project would, within the first couple of years, start to generate 20 to 50 million in direct spending through this project. Attracting workforce and tourism, this is why we see the business community coming along so strong and investing in this project. They know that to keep the great quality of life in communities that we have, and to keep them thriving, we need to attract residents. Because of how the world was, even pre-pandemic, people could pick where they wanted to live and then find a great paying job. And that's certainly still true here in central Iowa. We have a great education system, great communities, great quality of life, and affordable housing. Being able to add this, because we don't have beaches and because we don't have mountains, being able to activate our waterways will provide that next level to attract both workforce and tourism. And then environmental conservation. Each one of these projects contains water quality initiatives within them. And then it allows us to work upstream and leverage more additional federal dollars through what we're doing for water quality improvements up and downstream. And then outdoor recreation, again and again, this is something that our residents within central Iowa cite as one of their top things that they want in their communities and want additional access. So what is the benefit of this regional entity? Again, a cohesive user experience, including signage that once someone gets on, they're able to know where they're at and to get off. Consistent long-term maintenance, regional marketing, being able to market this to visitors outside of our region. Additionally, other surveys show that once someone visits our community, they're more likely to move here. Public education and notification. This is really important for water safety and water quality safety, to be able to form a cohesive system that people can go and at the site and then online go to one source to find out what the water safety is and flow rates are for that one day. And then additionally, being able to make one call if they see a snag, and then of course for emergency response. Additionally, streamlined communication with the DNR. All on water maintenance would be the benefit of this regional entity. And then funding back to the jurisdictions for maintenance and capital improvements, both with the proceeds from the business plan, but also with the continuous fundraising that will happen with this regional entity. So what are the benefits to your residents? First of all, the additional amenities, access to the different experiences throughout the region. We know that people like to visit multiple, and they don't just stay within our city boundaries to go do that, they go to others. And especially with Norwalk being so close to some of the signature projects in downtown, this will definitely be a benefit for the Norwalk residents. Enhanced quality of life, and then of course, increased visitors lead to additional funding for our cities through various tax options within our community.
So I'll jump in here and just kind of give a framework for the process of how we got to where we are right now, and then updates on where we are in that process. So building off of the success of the engineering study, an interim LLC was formed along with a board to help with the capital campaign that's funding the initial projects and get this structure off the ground. Central Iowa Water Trails that engaged national parks and recreation experts to help determine what is the best long-term operating structure for a system like this. We have nothing like this in Iowa or the United States for that matter. So we did a lot of work, interviews, surveys, small discussion groups with regional mayors and city managers to see what would be the best system that would fit with Central Iowa values, as well as what we've come accustomed to. From those studies, surveys, and discussion groups, those consultants recommended a nonprofit or a conservancy model that had very strong public partners. And as part of that, recommended a public-private funding mix. And so that's what we were building on. And after that recommendation, Scott Racker and I were brought on board to say exactly what will this look like? So how do we take that recommendation and make it a reality that works for Central Iowa? So from there, we formed a working group that was composed of all of our city managers. Luke was a great participant in that, as well as other county officials, the DNR, conservation boards. They were tasked with two main items. One is to build consensus on the organizational documents that would help us know how the different jurisdictions were working with this entity. And then along with the assistance of the governance committee of the Central Iowa Water Trails, help create the governing structure. So as far as our process, starting back in July, Scott Racker and I had individual interviews with all of our city managers and our counties. We've had various updates to the Central Iowa Water Trails committees. We held focus groups with our private sector partners to make sure that they would be invested in this in the long haul as well. They've been very committed to the capital campaign, but we wanted to test their willingness to keep supporting this effort down the road. Informing our elected officials is incredibly important, hearing your feedback, and that's what we're doing tonight. And then that working group that we mentioned met pretty regularly from September through December of last year. So to take a step back, there's a lot of pieces. And so I want to just kind of give the overview and then we'll go into the details. In looking at the Central Iowa Water Trails structure, it's 86 amenities throughout 12 cities and counties. Those regional sites, there's 81 of them owned and maintained by each jurisdiction. Then the downtown sites are a little different because there's just so much complexity to those. There's 5 access points in or near downtown Des Moines, working through the ownership model right now, but we do know that those vendor contracts and those operations will be overseen by this new nonprofit. The new nonprofit will be overseen by a regional board that's comprised of both public officials and community representatives. In looking at the funding, and again, this is not the capital campaign funding to create it. This is the ongoing funding. The regional sites will be maintained by each jurisdiction. The downtown sites, we conducted a pro forma that we'll show you a little bit more detail of that shows that this is a self-sustaining model. And then the new Central Iowa Water Trails nonprofit will have funding that reflects the representative mix. So the budget will include items like staffing, marketing, water safety, water monitoring, communication, and will be funded 70% by jurisdiction support, 30% by private support. Of that 70% jurisdiction support, the funding formula is based on 3 weighted factors: drainage area, access points, and population. And we'll go into detail of that in a minute, especially how that impacts Norwalk. So we asked the working group to really talk through a number of different things. And first was, what is the role of this regional entity and what's this board going to do? And first and foremost, it's to ensure we have a seamless network of trails. So overseeing the design standards, the signage, the operations, the safety, overseeing the public education and notification, as Hannah mentioned, a full marketing effort and events. So we're bringing people to the region as a whole to experience the 150 miles of waterways, and making sure that we have those reporting mechanisms back to our jurisdictions, and of course, approving budgets, collecting the funds, and then allocating them back to the region. The working group also worked through just some general terms for the agreement. So when we're looking at this agreement, this 28E that came in the packet, it's a perpetual agreement with a termination notification due July 1 with a 2-year sunset. So that way the other jurisdictions and the organization can prepare. They came to consensus on what is a water trail, what is a water trail project, and determined that all of the water trail projects will be owned by the jurisdiction. And then because of that, the liability is under the jurisdiction and covered under Iowa code, which really simplifies things. Also, we spent some time working through what are the maintenance standards. So that way those who have the water trails in their jurisdictions know what are the expectations for maintaining this, so we have a seamless network. And there's a lot of background there that went into it, and a number of different committees in addition to the working group as well. Then if the funding, right? That's always the big question. How much are you asking of me, and who determined this, and why? So first we looked at the operations and maintenance of the downtown sites. Before jumping into any of our governance discussions, we did a business model plan. Will this work, right? And we saw that it is a sustainable model. We'll show you the overview in just one moment. And the net revenue after expenses will go back to the maintenance endowment and reinvestment. Then we also looked at what's the regional operations and administrative expenses. Those include marketing, public education notification, the water safety, the maintenance, fundraising, and of course, some admin as well. And how will that be supported? So here's a very high level, kind of the end result of the business plan. If you're interested, we have much more detail. But once downtown, all those sites is fully operational, which will be a few years, the first year we're seeing net gains of 23,000, and then exponentially increasing by year 5 to 206,000 roughly. These are based on very conservative usage models based out of what we think is a similar market in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And they have had much success. We actually just did a touch base with them to see, are you indeed meeting your pro forma? And with the exception of 1 year over the past several years, they've been exceeding it. So we asked the Water Trail staff to estimate a budget for the next 3 years so we can get an idea of what would it take for this regional maintenance, this regional coordination. For year 1, we're looking at about $1.1 million for the admin and operations, and fluctuating a little bit and going down as the organization gets a little more streamlined and it gets up on its feet. When we look at the public-private mix, this is what was recommended by our initial consultants. And so we're looking at, when you split that 70% public funding, 30% private, about $786,000 for that first year. We asked the working group, what would be fair? What would be reasonable? How should we evaluate what a jurisdiction should be paying, and what should that be based on? And it was actually a pretty not as heated discussion as we thought it might be, looking at 25% drainage area weighted, 25% with the access points, and 50% population. Now, how does that relate to Norwalk? You're probably wondering right now. We also thought it was really important for our communities who see the regional importance of this, see the benefits to your residents, to have an opportunity to have a seat at the table and to have that voice. And so for all communities, we're calling them our partner cities that do not have an access point in your city limits, there would be a kind of a flat fee. And we tested this with the city managers that were in the meetings with us, and it would be a $5,000 a year, which is less than any of the other cities with access points, to be a part of it, to help the region to know that you are also benefiting your residents here. So that's the 28E. Our next steps, we're following up with all the individual jurisdictions. We ask you to review the 28E and discuss it with your legal departments. And then we'd like to know within the next 30 days whether you'd like to be a part of this, if you're in, what your concerns are. And by July, we would like to have all of them signed because that is when the new entity will be up and operating. We'll discuss that board composition in a second, but first, are there any questions regarding this 28E agreement and any details of it?
Yeah, I have a question.
Mhm.
So right now Norwalk's cost would be 5,000. If at some point we were able to have an access point or a waterway,
Mhm.
how would that, I'm assuming that cost would change.
Yes. Then we would put you into that weighted formula. So the population is based on the same population numbers that the MPO uses. 25%, what's your drainage area in your community? And then how many access points do you have?
Do you think Bondurant would be a good sample?
I think so. Hannah, do you?
Yeah, I would have to get the spreadsheet, but I think probably if it's pretty simple, they have one access point. It's soft trails. It would be a similar water body. I think,
Yeah.
from what I know, and then and they're actually going to expand their piece, but their portion in the formula would stay the same.
What-
And
and
go
that's,
ahead.
Jackie, I figured at some point somebody might be asking that. So I always was looking at other communities, and Bondurant to me was the closest one. So I watched their numbers, and I want to say it's around 12,000.
8,500. Here, I'll come back to that slide. So Bondurant is right up here, just shy of 8,600.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Any other questions? Go ahead.
And my only other question goes back to, so you had the map up earlier of all the different access points, and I didn't see any considered even close to Norwalk. And Warren County owns a piece of ground that butts up against the river by us, and we already own a piece of ground that butts up against the river. So I was curious why, maybe you guys don't know, but why those weren't even marked as access points.
Mhm.
So this was before our time, but that was probably a decision made during the engineering study phase with the MPO in 2016. So I don't know if there's anyone on city staff that was there that would recall maybe why a site wasn't selected or put in. Usually it would have to do with either ownership or jurisdictional support, like jurisdiction input. So I'm not quite sure what that was. If there's anyone from staff that would know, otherwise I can find out.
I wasn't real involved with that, but I do remember asking that question back when they were doing that engineering study, and it was basically the condition of North River. They felt like didn't match well with the types of trails they were wanting to provide from here to there. So I think it was yeah, the engineering side of it just was saying that they didn't view that as being a candidate at that time for something that you put access to. So I imagine that will change as we grow towards that direction and have more stuff out. So.
Luke, this is Stephanie. Can you get closer to your microphone, please?
Yeah, couldn't very well.
I apologize. Thank you. Just my recollection, in case you didn't hear that, was from the engineering side, I wasn't real involved with it other than just asking the same question that David did back in 2016 when they were doing that. And it was just a thought that the North River corridor didn't lend itself to the as much of the active use that they thought some of the other corridors did.
We do have a group of other jurisdictions that maybe weren't, for whatever reason, not included in that first engineering study that are talking with us and considering what does that look like for this next round of development of, other amenities. Nothing has been worked out, but we do know that this this will grow, and that is our hope. So there will be a process laid out into how to develop other sites.
Okay. Any other questions on the initial part? Okay. Go ahead and move along here to make good use of your time. The next question really is always, in addition to how much, it's who has a seat at the table and how and why. And so this is a part that has not come to full consensus yet. And so we're working through that, but wanted to make sure you had an update on where we are. And looking at the board, we're looking at 3-year terms that are staggered initially, so we don't have one big rollover in 3 years, no more than 30 members, and that the representation will reflect the funding mix. We heard this loud and clear throughout the whole process that this would be really important. So we're looking at 70% public representation and 30% private. The jurisdiction representatives would be elected officials appointed by their mayor. The county representatives would be from the Board of Supervisors, and the private representatives would be initially nominated by the Water Trails Executive Committee, that is the temporary board, and then by the official executive committee once this board is operating. The board composition, what you're looking at now is what the working group saw and agreed upon and is in flux as we are talking with our different councils. So what we're looking at right now is one representative from each city with an access point, one collective representative from our partner cities like Norwalk that would have the opportunity to renew each year, 2 representatives from Polk County and 1 each from Dallas and Warren counties, rep from Polk County Conservation, from the Great Outdoors Foundation, 7 community leaders, and then a DNR representative that would be non-voting per their agreements that they have with other boards. We're working through this, and we'll love to hear your feedback momentarily once we get through the other proposed composition. The private reps would be community leaders that will reflect the private sector funding and an inclusive collective voice of the regional trails network. They'd be nominated by the executive committee with recommendations from our supporting committees, and consideration would be given to those who reflect the private funding mix, water trails user groups, diverse communities, and making sure that we have nice representation throughout the region as well. They must reside or work in Polk, Warren, or Dallas counties. The executive committee also, this is not confirmed yet, but what is written in the bylaws at this point, which is just a draft, 9 members are 4 officers. Our committee chairs, the standing committees of the Central Iowa Water Trails will be finance, operations and maintenance, inclusion, and environmental conservation, a Great Outdoors Foundation representative, and that the officers would hold 2-year terms. So our next steps with the board composition, the governance, the bylaws and articles of incorporation will make adjustments to the board composition based on the feedback we're receiving from all of our councils over the next few weeks. The governance committee of the Water Trails will then finalize that structure. The new nonprofit will be formed. We'll ask for our mayors and boards of supervisors to make those appointments, and the new board will begin regular meetings in July of 2021, so just later this year. So with that, what questions can we answer, or concerns or thoughts you'd like to share as far as the board composition?
Do you know how many of the how many other community specific number like Norwalk there are?
There are 4 that were a part of the working group consistently. Norwalk, Waukee, Polk City, and Grimes. And so those, there are others that might want to be a part of it, but it's really about 4 partner cities at the most right now is what we would anticipate.
So it'd be collectively us with that maximum amount of communities that would be represented by 1 vote.
Correct. And so if you're the only community that comes in, of course, then, or one of 2, there would be more representation that way, and the opportunity for that individual to be chosen by the partner cities each year.
And having witnessed a number of other regional organizations that are created, this is very much in line with how other organizations are set up, where that representation is based on that funding.
I wish we had a Des Moines River or a Raccoon River coming through Norwalk, no doubt about it.
Well, if West Des Moines keeps developing, maybe North River will.
So when our status changes by having an access point,
Mhm.
then our representation changes on the board.
Exactly.
What does that look like then when that changes? I mean, what would we be looking at there?
You would be looking at one board member.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments or feedback or questions for us?
Thank you.
Thanks for the
So we are, like we said, in the process of collecting feedback, and sometimes after you see this, maybe something hits you later. So you, Luke, I know has our contact information. And so if something comes up or you have questions, please feel free to reach out. Additionally, the committee will be coming together in approximately 2 weeks to review the feedback from all of the jurisdictions. So if you could send us that feedback that you would like us to consider, if you have any, within the next 2 weeks, that would allow us to make sure that it gets seen by the committee.
And then our goal is by the end of March, we know which communities we can count on. And then by July, having agreements signed and appointments made. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And we appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being here. All right. Next, we have an in-house mowing presentation by Robin.
Mayor, members of City Council, Robin Leeper, Park and Recreation Director. Last year, you guys voted to approve the budget with the City of Norwalk Park and Recreation Department taking mowing back in-house. At that time, we were mowing some parkland, and other areas of the city, we were contracting that out. At that time, we received quotes from several vendors. We also put our estimates together, presented that to you. Our estimates, of course, were less, and we promised that we would bring that back to you after season to show you the savings that we were able to provide. The spreadsheet that I have here in the packet does show that at that time, the combination of the lowest mowing bid and the lowest landscaping bid, that total was almost $144,000. Our estimate at that time was that for landscaping and mowing, we could do it in-house for about $109,000. And then column C shows the actual cost, and we were actually able to come in much less than that. And our actual costs for mowing, that includes labor, that includes actually a new mower, graduated fee for the new mower, and some other equipment. And that cost ended up being $53,000. So our savings was about $91,000. So by bringing that in-house. And the quality that we are seeing is much better than it was when we were having third-party vendors coming in and doing it. So much happier with our product.
And there was a council member that had emailed me a question about, hey, did you take into account benefits, not just wages? And I told them that there's actually 2 more tabs in your Excel file that dive into all the details of that, even the depreciation of vehicles.
Yes,
So certainly this is a true representation of your full cost.
correct. It is. And that's all kind of summarized into this tab that I gave you guys. And whoever that is, if they want me to share that full document with, I can. So let me know.
No, but I appreciate the fact that you covered it. That was me.
Yeah, okay.
But thank you for being that meticulous.
Oh, you're welcome. That's Dakota. I can't take credit for that. So he put the spreadsheet together.
Good job, whoever got it done.
So. But yes, so good job for,
That is,
I mean, I'm very happy with our department, and I will say 100% of this goes to Dakota. So I will pass on, the happiness that you guys have. I think he's on Zoom. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good job, Dakota.
Good job, Dakota.
excellent.
Hey, we'll have to find more things for Dakota to do. That was pretty good.
I think we have some pretty large chunk of land here. So.
Careful what you wish for, right?
Right.
Exactly. All right. Any other questions for Robin? All right. Thank you, Robin.
Yep.
All right. Item 6 on the agenda is consent agenda. We have approved the February 4th, 2021 minutes of the regular city council meeting. Expenditures, tax abatements, renewal Class C beer permit, Class B wine permit, Sunday sales for Dollar General at 1021 Sunset Drive. A renewal of Class C liquor license with outdoor service and Sunday sales for 1908 Draft House at 9500 Marketplace Drive. We're going to set a public hearing for March 4th, 2021 to approve the fiscal year 22 budget. We have a resolution to approve pay estimate number 1 to Howry Construction for construction of the Great Western Trail Connection Phase 1 project. A resolution approving a construction contract with Tri-City Electric Company for implementation of building security cameras and door access controls. A resolution setting March 4th, 2021 for a public hearing regarding a rezoning request for 2600 50th Avenue to change from AR to R160. A resolution approving amendment number 2 for engineering services for Colonial Parkway Regional Detention Pond Project. Have an approval of a police department application for a Warren County Philanthropic Partnership grant to purchase ballistic helmets. Have approval to submit grant applications with no requirement for matching funds. A resolution approving the City of Norwalk Park and Rec Department to submit an application for the Fields for Kids grant through Major League Baseball and the Minnesota Twins. A resolution approving a 28E agreement for mutual assistance for Warren County Area Fire Rescue Services. We have a resolution approving fire and emergency medical services contract agreement pursuant to Iowa Code Section 28E between the City of Martinsdale, Iowa, and the City of Norwalk, Iowa. We have approval of park supervisor job description and monthly reports. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, so motion by Cool, second by Livingston. Lindsay,
A
would you
lot
call
of
the
good
roll?
work in that too, Mayor. There's a lot of good work included in that unfortunately we don't get the time to delve into because it's in a consent agreement.
Right.
Consent agenda, but a lot of
Chris.
good work in it.
All right, go for it.
Councilmember Lester,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes,
Reba,
Yes,
Cool,
Yes,
Livingston.
Yes.
All right, that motion carries. Item 7, we have old and new business for consideration, discussion, and possible action. So item A is a public hearing for fiscal year 2022 capital improvement plan budget. We'll open up the public hearing at 6:43 PM. And Jean, I'll turn this over to you.
thank you. Good evening. The fiscal year 22 capital improvement budget is approximately $20.5 million. This budget includes projects for street, water, sewer, stormwater, general fund budget, capital items for police, fire, EMS, library, economic development, community development, parks and recreation, and administration. It also includes TIF projects and a couple LMI initiatives. The sources of funding vary. Some projects are a combination of sources of funding. Those include general obligation and water revenue debt of approximately 15.5 million. Lost, which is local option sales and service taxes of about 1.5 million. We have enterprise fund revenues, which consist of sewer and water and stormwater of about 1.5 million. We have tax increment property tax projects of about 1 million. And then we have grant. We actually did receive a couple grants for approximately 900,000. CIP has been developed and reviewed based on priorities of the elected officials, staff, and citizens. The CIP has been incorporated into the city's full budget, which will be submitted to the elected group for final approval on March 4th, 2021. The detailed sheets that are included in the packets, which we continually try to change and updates as things change. We do that on an ongoing basis. I think it is important to mention that the document may change for various reasons and maybe should be viewed as a guide, if you will. Sometimes, or I should say oftentimes rather, the scope of a project may change, cost and expenses can modify a project, or new projects come up, making it necessary to delay or move various projects up. With that, if you have any questions for myself or any of the department heads, we would be happy to answer those.
Thank you for getting this to us as early as you did. It was a huge help. I had a lot of time to digest it.
No, I appreciate it as well. And the presentation was very good and really answered a lot of my questions.
Thank you.
All right. Lindsay, have we received any oral or written comments on this? Okay. Do you have any other public comment? Hearing none, we will go ahead and close public hearing at 6:46 p.m. Thank you, Jean. And just as a comment, Jean is at home because she's not feeling really well. Otherwise, I'm sure she would have been here. So item 7 is resolution, or item 7B, sorry, is resolution adopting the City of Norwalk Capital Improvement Plan for fiscal year 2022. We just had a public hearing on this item, and this is the resolution that will adopt the CIP for fiscal year 22. Luke or Jean, do you have anything to add?
I have nothing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any discussion or comments from council? Additional questions for Jean?
So if as we go through the process now of different projects and how we decide them, so we still have the liberty to be able to move, change, delay, continue, whatever as we think appropriate. Even with this action, this lines it up, right?
Yes.
But we can still change if we do want something.
Right. So as an example, you know, we're in negotiations with the sports complex with that, you know, and if something happens with that we want to shift some dollars around, we can always amend the CIP to do that.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right, so can I get a motion to approve the following resolution? So the capital improvement plan CIP budget for fiscal year 22 be adopted and will be formally approved with the entire budget with the appropriate levy to pay for these items on March 4th, 2021.
Motion.
Second.
Too late, Brian. Motion by Livingston, second by Cool. Lindsay, would you call a roll?
Got to be here to win, Brian.
Councilmember Baker,
Yes.
Reba,
Yes.
Cool,
Yeah.
Livingston,
Yes.
Lester.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries. Item 7C is a public hearing on a proposal to enter into general obligation loan agreements. So we'll open up the public hearing at 6:49 p.m. Jean, I'll turn this one over to you too.
And I apologize for not being in person as well. So we just conducted the public hearing on the CIP. Included in that were the city's general obligation debt projects. Due to the city's desire to issue debt in the upcoming fiscal year, the city is required by law to approve this resolution. This resolution will allow us to pay, actually utilize debt service taxes to pay for these projects. The amount of principal and interest included in the fiscal year 22 long-term debt schedule is $775,200. This amount is for projects specifically paid for by debt service taxes, approximately $6.4 million. The other $7.8 million that is in our general obligation debt will be abated with TIF. And TIF helps offset the amount that we need to ask as far as debt service taxes. So it's a great funding mechanism for us. With that, if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Lindsay, have we received any oral or written comments on this item?
No, we have not.
Okay, any other public comment? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing at 6:50 PM. Item 7D is resolution taking additional action on proposals to enter into general obligation loan agreements, combining loan agreements, and providing for the levy of taxes to pay general obligation corporate purpose bonds, Series 2021A. So we just had a public hearing on this item. This is the resolution that indicates the city is going to issue debt in a future fiscal year and that we're going to use the debt service fund to pay off that debt. Gene, you got anything to add?
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
All right, any other discussion or comments from council? Questions? Or any other public comment? Okay, so can I get a motion for the resolution taking additional action on a proposal to enter into a loan agreement, combining loan agreements and providing for the levy of taxes to pay general obligation corporate purpose bonds, Series 2021A?
Motion.
Second.
Okay. So,
We should let Brian have.
okay, we'll do that. Motion by Baker, we'll do second by Reva. Let's do that.
There you go.
Lindsay, would you call roll?
Councilmember Riva,
Yes.
Poole,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Lester,
Yes.
Baker.
Yes.
All right, that motion carries. Item 7E is a resolution approving turn lane agreement for Sunset Estates. So Luke Parrish, I'm going to turn this one over to you.
Thank you. This is the turn lane agreement for Sunset Estates. It was requirement of Plat 1 was that before we did any other plats in Sunset Estates, we'd have a turn lane agreement that basically looked at the status of turn lanes on North Avenue. We approved this, I forget the date. We approved it originally back in December when we mailed that to the developer. They had their attorney review it and wanted some changes to it. I guess the history there is we originally wrote this draft back in the spring, kind of backburnered it with other stuff going on, dusted it off last fall when we got a construction plans in for the first next plat, and missed the step where we should have had them do that review prior to the city approving it. So what we're asking for you today is make approval of a new agreement that has some minor changes based on the developer's review of the agreement.
What are those minor changes?
Hey, Jim, you worked more on that than I did. Can you run through those?
I can even tell you one.
Yeah.
The basic one is there was quite a bit of just clarification. The main point, if it was substantive at all, was them saying that along with this reanalysis that has to take place, that part of that reanalysis also needs to reaffirm that a turn lane is actually needed. Because everything we wrote in the agreement was an assumption automatically that the turn lane would be needed. And from our perspective, we didn't really think that was a big deal to reaffirm at that point in time. That was really the only other than that, Jim, I just recall it was really grammatical clarification.
Yeah, they came back frankly with a lot of changes that we said no to and put it back to the way that the original agreement was. I think they wanted a little bit more control of the actual study. And I think we were sensitive to that. We didn't want them to dictate the study and do the study themselves. So we wanted to address that, but there was a lot of things they suggested we just said no to. So
Yeah, I kind of skipped over that part. They said a lot of changes and we said, no, we're,
Well, it makes sense that, you know, if it wasn't required, we probably wouldn't build it, so.
Yeah.
We're probably good. I'm good.
Who's paying for the reevaluation since that's part of this new agreement?
That would fall under just our normal subdivision requirements for a traffic study. So the way that we have it now is we contract that, like we pick who does the traffic study and everything, and then they pay that through their normal outside engineering fees.
But haven't they already done one?
They did.
Well,
Yes.
but this spells out that they have to do a second one. I mean, it just says reevaluation. It doesn't say who's going to pay for it or who's going to do it. Does it? Am I just missing that part?
would that be just a simple add to put that? That's probably a good clarification to have in there.
Yeah.
Just include that'll be at their expense according to our subdivision.
Yeah, again, my assumption would be that we follow what our subdivision ordinance says, how those get paid, but we can certainly add that to the language.
Yeah, we could put that in there, just to be sure.
Ed, Stephanie's having a hard time hearing you. Can you maybe say?
Oh, I'm sorry. I said,
That's
yeah, we
okay.
can sure put that in there,
Thank
just
you.
to make sure that it's clear.
I think it's a good idea to have that. And then I think, as far as 75% of the developed lots, I think I may change that. It's not, I don't see it in there.
It is still in there.
Okay.
You didn't see it in this one?
I see it.
No, but no, I wanted 75% of, instead of developed lots, 75% of the proposed, 75% of the proposed lots within the PUD.
So then another minor,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So do we need to throw this back to them to say yes?
Or can we just
Or
make
change,
those
or can we
changes?
just make it?
Have they looked at this since?
They've seen this copy and that came back, we accepted their changes. I'd prefer that council take action, say this is the agreement.
Okay.
Okay.
That's my recommendation. We've gone back and forth with them.
So we're going to change to clarify who pays for the reevaluation. And then what was the other change?
It's gonna be who pays for it, who decides on the valuation. So you wanna make sure that we've got the discretion on picking who makes that
Oh,
study
you bet, yeah.
and that they pay for it.
And that's what our subdivision agreement says right now,
Yeah,
right?
right,
That
yeah.
we
That-
choose
So-
the
Absolutely.
agent, but they pay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we can simply make reference, can't we, as per current
For our current
subdivision?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that this is setting anything different. It's just letting them know that, hey, this is
Right.
what our standards
Yeah.
are.
And then the 75%,
Yeah.
What does that change?
what was that wording?
Basically
Proposed
75%, the build out would be 75% of the proposed lots of the PUD. Because otherwise they can kind of determine how many the developed lots are.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion from council? So from what I can gather, can I get a motion to approve the Sunset Estates turn lane agreement as shown in attachment A with a change on who pays for the reevaluation to make it per current standards and a change to 75% of proposed lots?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, so motion by Rivas, second by Livingston. Any further discussion? Lindsay, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Cool,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Lester,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Riva.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Item 7F is a resolution authorizing the mayor and city manager to execute a labor agreement with IAFF Local 5274. So this is for the new firefighters and EMS union. I'd like to take a moment to express how much we value our fire department, along with all other city staff. I want to be clear that the creation of this union is not an indication of a management labor dispute at all, but rather just a reflection of a growing community. The International Association of Firefighters, the IAFF, is a brotherhood and sisterhood that stands for more than just union bargaining. They provide a host of other resources for our firefighters. And we should recognize that it is important to our firefighters to be a part of this larger organization. I want to thank Mike Galloway, legal counsel, and Carrie Kitey for their work on this. So Carrie, would you like to go over the agreement?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. For those on the Zoom call, my name is Carrie Keat. I'm the Human Resources and Accounting Specialist for the city. Last Friday, myself, Luke Nelson, and Chief Coburn, along with our legal counsel, Mike Galloway, met with some representatives of the newly formed fire union. The negotiations went very smoothly, lasted about 3 hours, which really isn't very long for establishing a new agreement. I feel like the tentative agreement that you've been provided with, along with the agenda statement, really covers all the aspects of the agreement. You know, the two main issues that were brought to us were really wages and their PTO leave. And so we were able to meet them halfway on both of those, I would definitely say. With the timing of them getting formed and these negotiations, it was pretty far into our budget season and getting things set. So this first year of the contract, we were only able to give them about a 3% raise. But then the bulk of the wage increase you'll see on that second year. This is a 2-year contract. And then on PTO, we were able to raise their accrual rates a bit to account for their 24-hour shifts. And then if you have any other specific questions, I'd be happy to answer those. I would definitely say that I know I feel very good about this agreement. I feel that it definitely brings their wages, the firefighters' wages, better in line with our comparable cities, and really makes it more fair and competitive for us as the city expands.
I apologize for saying your name.
That's okay. Happens all the time.
Other questions for Carrie?
So at the end of the contract, where will we be sitting at as far as their comparabilities? Will they be mid-range or?
I'm sorry, what did you ask?
Their comparabilities with the communities or that we compare to?
With other cities,
What would
yeah.
be like?
I would definitely say middle of the way. We're not going to be the top payer, but we're going to be definitely better set than where we are right now.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from council or any public comment? Can I get a motion to authorize the mayor and the city manager to execute an agreement with IAFF Local 5274?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, so motion by Lester, second by Cool. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Lindsay, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Livingston,
Yes.
Lester,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Reba,
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Item 7G. It's a second reading of an ordinance to amend the official zoning map of the city of Norwalk, Iowa by rezoning certain property at 1008 North Avenue from R2 to infill planned unit development, IPUD, and to adopt the master plan and establish rules, regulations, and guidelines for the development of the Center North IPUD. So this is the second reading to approve the PUD for the area across the street to the south of the library. Anything else to add, Luke?
That seems to cover it.
All right, any discussion, questions, comments from council? Or any public comment? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the second reading of the ordinance as detailed on page 4 of the item in the council packet?
Motion, please.
I'll take that as a second, Brian. Motion by
Second
Cool.
is great.
Motion by Cool, second by Baker. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Lindsay, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Lester,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Reba,
Yes.
Cool,
Yes.
Livingston.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Item 7H is a resolution approving purchase agreement for approximately 179 acres of ground. So this is the land we talked about at a closed session at our last meeting. The city of Norwalk is going to purchase 179 acres, more or less, of park ground around the North River for $300,000 and also pay for the closing costs of the purchase. So council, please know that Robin is working with the NRCS to further review the conservation easement that exists on the ground. And I understand that they have a lengthy list of questions to address. And I'm excited about this land and the future use for our community. I think it's going to be great to have that type of area available for our citizens. Luke or Jim, do you want to go over the agreement?
I can go over it. It's basically in lines with what was kind of given us as a guideline from the council at the last meeting. It is $300,000 is the purchase price. We would take immediate possession of it, and at that point in time, it'd be ours. The seller doesn't maintain any other ownership or rights over it. We talked about like hunting rights, stuff like that, but that's gone. One thing we didn't mention is that there is a building associated there during the negotiations. The seller wanted to exclude the building in the beginning. He wasn't really hard at maintaining that. Since we made our offer, I told him no, we wanted the building also, because he had apparently kind of agreed to sell that little portion of it to the neighboring property owner. And I basically said, no, we want to keep that building. And he ended up being okay with that in exchange for doing us assuming the closing costs. And closing costs we'll talk to $1,000 basically for closing costs. We're going to pay for abstracting and transfer tax. And that's about it. I'll do the rest of the work. So there won't be attorney's fees or anything like that with that.
That building is actually outside of the easement area.
That's right. Yeah. When you look at the easement description from NRCS, it's just I think it's up on screen now, basically a circled area, but there really is, other than the building and then a way to get through the gate to the building is about the only thing that's accepted out on that.
Okay. That'll be nice to have for work.
Yeah.
It sounds like they've already got it filled up after the meeting I had with them this morning.
Whoa.
We haven't been inside it, so we kind of
Jim,
see the structure.
Jim, this is Stephanie. I'm sorry. Can you get closer to your microphone? What did you say
Yes.
about the cutout on the red?
Well, basically that circle on the red, there was
That's
a
a
red
pole barn?
circle on the map that was up on board.
Right.
That's where the building's located. And basically it's just a small area. There really isn't. It's basically the footprint of the building along with a little entrance drive that comes through the gate there.
Okay. That part I got. What about it? Do we not get that? That's the
No,
pole
we
barn.
do get that. At
Okay.
first, when we were negotiating, he wanted to accept that out.
Okay.
And sell it to the neighboring property owner, but basically I said no, and he wasn't really willing to throw away the contract or the offer just because of that. So he agreed to keep it in there, and it's going to be nice, I'm sure, because we're going to have some sort of vehicles, I'm sure, down there and mowers
Yes.
and things like that. So it's going to come in useful. But yeah, there's a good picture of it. That building on the far left on the west side, that would be included in the sale.
Okay. Thank you.
Did whoever was talking, I believe it was Robin, that was going to be talking to him about the easement? Have we gotten any indication that it's going to work for what we intended it at all?
Yeah, so the basics that we are hoping for is to have trails and a small parking lots. And before we even sign the agreement, our talks with them have all intention of that they would say yes to that. But there's many more questions about other things that we want to do that we are sending them more questions on.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
They also have plans for some extensive improvement of that property as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
That they would pay for, not us.
Yeah.
It almost looked like some more waterways. I'm not quite sure on their maps. They do show some other ponds in the north that are going to be forming. I don't know if that's just going to be a wetland like cattail swampy area, or whether it's going to be standing water.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
And they being DNR. is that who-
NCRF.
NCRS.
Yeah.
And
And
ours.
RCS.
Yeah, I think their budget is, what is it, around
National
400,000, I
Resource
think I saw,
Conservation Services.
that they're gonna do for improvements. About 400,000 is what they're gonna do on it, so.
That could work out pretty nice.
And hopefully we can give some input on that since they haven't started it yet.
Right.
It'd be nice if we can have some cooperation with them. Now, as far as a parking area, the city is we're still gonna have to figure out access for this, because we've got private access as far as the city being able to go in there and out of there. But as far as a public access, we do not have a public access figured out at this point in time.
Yeah, we can do that though. Doesn't this near about the county's property across the river?
Yeah, yep, it does. It's, the county has a lot of ground south of the river too. Now, this purchase would include some property south of the river too. Basically along Highway 28 down to the next, down to the road to the south of there over the river, we would own.
Orange Street.
Yeah, we would own that 40 that abuts the 28, Highway 28, and then the area just to the left of that also, I believe. But when you get three of those squares over, that's where the county owns their ground. And they've got extensive park and trails that basically go along that river all the way back there. Luke's
Okay.
Luke's outlining it right there.
Yeah, there's a map attached.
Oh, it is on
You're
the.
working really hard.
Oh, well, I'll stop doing that then. That'd be great.
Smarter, not harder.
I wanted to see more.
Trying to tell you.
I was enjoying that.
So when Luke switches to the other map, just for clarification.
I'm jumping over there.
I know. So I just want to make sure I understand what this line means.
Which,
It's page 8 or 9.
Yeah.
9's a little closer.
yeah,
So this, right, this yellow line along the river, that's included in our property?
that is included in our property, yes.
Perfect. Okay, that's what I wanted to
Yes.
make sure I understood.
Well, let's let Luke get down there so we can all
Yeah.
see it.
8's more context, 9's a little closer of the property. It
Yes,
just-
that's right.
So that yellow line on the bottom left that follows the river,
That is correct.
that's our property line.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then to the right of that also, then you're gonna see the squares, the yellow squares, basically. We're on both sides of the river right there.
Oh, okay.
And the county, the curvy line that you were first referring to across the river from there is where the county ground is.
Okay, yeah,
Good,
that's awesome.
good. I think we may have our access point on the river. What do you think?
Just need a little bit more water to flow through there on a regular basis.
Yeah. We need to figure that one
Right?
out.
Big rain, bringing my kayak, putting it right in at 28.
Oh, I can see it. Now. I can see it now.
All right. Any other discussion or comments, questions from council? Or any public comment?
Then we do have a 30-day due diligence on it, which means that if there is something fatal that we notice during our examination within the 30 days, we can say, forget it, we're out of this. And then we have a closing date set, so we'll get moving on that pretty quick.
Okay.
Awesome.
I appreciate the work on the negotiations and getting this done, and I think it's a fantastic step forward for our community.
Yeah, I agree.
Great.
Yeah.
Look at, not too long ago, we did that park plan, right? As part of the general plan. And I asked Luke the other day, how's that put us for acreage? And he said, right past. That's great that we could accomplish that, who'd have thought, right?
Mhm.
So this is great.
Yeah, no, I'm real excited about it, and it's something.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic.
Something that'll be here 100 years from now, and the city will own it, and it'll be a little gem, I think.
Well, we can do some nice stuff with it down there. That's nice.
Thank you, everyone, for approving that and being as excited as we are, so.
We got a vote yet, I think, don't we?
Well,
It's leaning that way.
Well,
get there.
Don't get your cart before your horse.
Okay.
Can I get a motion to approve the mayor's execution of
Motion.
Second.
agreement for the purchase of approximately 179 acres of real estate as described in the packet from the seller owner of the property for the price of $300,000 plus closing expenses I had a motion from Lester and a second from Reva. Any further discussion? Lindsay, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Baker,
Yes.
Reva,
Yes.
Cool,
Yes.
Livingston,
Yes.
Lester.
Yes.
All right, motion
Okay,
carries.
now, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. 7I is a discussion regarding finances for sports complex. Holly and Jean, I'll turn it over to you guys.
Mayor?
Yep, we
Yeah.
can hear you now.
Hello?
Hi. Okay.
There she is.
Jean, I don't know if you want to start it or not, or if you want me just to kind of do what I've been doing with the presentation.
I'll let you start with the overview and then when we get into the finances, I can chime in. Does that sound all right?
Sounds great. I'm just going to switch over here. Can you guys see this? It says Community Sports Center.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, I apologize for everybody who's maybe already seen this or heard about it in the last week or two. There have been a few changes and versions of this, and it'll continue to change a little bit. But the whole point of it is that a couple of weeks ago, council asked us to go back and really take a deeper look at the financial possibility of owning this community sports center facility or leasing it from the private developer that was looking at building this entire sports campus project. So the piece that we would be looking at either owning or leasing is a portion of the greater building that they would be constructing. At the end, we have a couple of maps to kind of show that overall overhead again, but you'll probably remember it's kind of an L shape, and one chunk of it we were looking at for more of the community center type of space or the public facility use, indoor courts and parks and rec offices. So we went back and we looked at the estimates that we were given for the construction of this entire project and specified just that chunk of the building that we were looking at for our use, what it would cost if we were to build it, own it. We don't have exact operational costs, what it would cost each year to maintain it. We don't know that to a T, but we do know what it would cost to build it. So we ran through that, and then we also put together a couple, actually 4 different scenarios if we were to lease the facility from a developer versus owning it. So we'll just go through really quickly on what we kind of came up with as an overview for the ownership versus leasing.
Hey, Holly,
Yes.
will you hit the present button up in your upper right-hand corner just to make that a little bit larger for everybody? To present your slides as a slideshow.
I
Right by the yellow button, up on the
Yep, a
right.
little bit to the right.
Oh, my face was covering it. Got it. I knew I should have left my camera off.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay, now, so this first slide here just kind of shows an overall view of what it would look like to own versus lease. And then as we get into the rest of the slides, we'll break all of these pieces down in more detail. But essentially what it would cost us to build that chunk of the facility ourselves would be about 14.2 million. That includes what we estimated for the land, our portion of parking and the facility itself, the 4 indoor courts, parks and rec offices, and kind of shared general common space area. So over on the right where you see this $6 million figure, the reason why that's there is because that's kind of a number that we initially started out with when we were talking to these developers for this project, because the last sports developers, if you'll remember when we were talking about doing an agreement with them, we were also looking at this overall $6 million incentive / lease agreement where we would get use of space for a part of that, and then the other part would be an incentive. So that's why the $6 million figure is in there. And then what we did is we broke this down. So if we were to pay this loan note back, our annual payments would be $862,000 versus if we were to lease this space, it'd be about $300,000. And we're looking at this being anywhere between 10 and 20 years for a lease, not prepaid, just paying it annually. So that's what those numbers there are, and we'll get into those in a little bit more detail here. But just looking at, kind of the life of the asset, I think it was maybe Council Member Baker that had asked about, assets and Would it make more sense if we own this facility? And in many business senses, yes, it would, of course, to have your own facility. But looking at it financially and from the government standpoint, owning facilities is unfortunately not as good of a situation as a private business. But so looking at the life of the asset, it could last up to 50 years if we built it, very high standards. Of course, we'll have repairs starting, within 10, 20, maybe 15 years within that frame. With the lease side, we would be able to renegotiate the lease between 10 and 20 years. So the maintenance, of course, would be on the owners, and we would have an agreement with them on that for the maintenance side of it. On the political side, it does become kind of an issue if we were to own our own facility, because we would have to go out to vote and we would have to end up raising taxes. And so that's something that is, would not be a short process and would probably be a bit contentious, as we know when we raise taxes, but it is an option and we could do it, and maybe the public would vote for that. We don't know 100% how they would, but it would require that. The question always comes up if TIF can be used. So if we own the facility ourselves, we would not be able to use TIF for it because it would not generate any TIF. And the other TIF that we have within the other districts in the community are already set aside. Those increments are already set aside for other projects. So we would not have new TIF for this particular project. Obviously, if we lease it from the developers, we would have TIF generated from it because it would be privately owned. In terms of flexibility, where it would hurt us on the flexibility side is we would have less options in the somewhat near future to build another facility or a bigger facility. So if we own this one and we owe this money on this note, we'd really be stuck with this facility for a while. We would not have the funds to grow into something different or build another one in the near future. Whereas if we lease it, we would be able to start kind of planning in the future. If we did want to build and own our own facility, we would have a little more time. It buys us, 10 to 20 years to plan for that, really discover if the community really wants that or they don't, or they enjoy just leasing that space with a little bit of limitations for the use. So if we owned, we would have complete control of the facility and the programming. If we lease, we have to share that space a little bit and negotiate what we get to use. But we also have less responsibility, of course. We don't have to staff it, have the overhead, all of those things that go with owning the facility. In terms of property tax revenue, like we mentioned before, there would be no new generation if we owned it. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see a breakdown of what, just kind of very conservative numbers, if this project comes in at a $5 million value versus 10 or 15, what that looks like in tax generation. So you can see that over there, what it would be bringing in for taxes annually based on those values, projected values. We're being really conservative on those numbers. If everything does go forward the way that it's planned and what they're looking at building, we believe it'll value in pretty high, anywhere between, if they build the entire thing the way that we've been looking at it, it could be up to 18 million, but just being conservative, we're in here in the 5 and 10 million for these scenarios that we're talking about, just to be extra safe. And then on the outdoor space, if we were to build this for this price tag up here, it would not include any outdoor fields. With the leasing, we have the option to lease some of their outdoor fields, which we would as well. If we owned our own facility, we could work out a lease option for the field space. But what this does do for us too is right now, Parks and Rec has to turn away a lot of teams that come in that need field space if we don't have the capacity at this time. So this way, those teams would be able to go to this private venue and rent the fields from them. And then it would open up all of the field use that the city currently owns for Parks and Rec programming. So that's just kind of an overview, but we will get into a little bit more details here of all of that. So again,
Holly, will you go back a slide quick?
Yep.
So that 6 million, is that in just the lease payments, or does that include any upfront incentives and such also?
That's just the lease. If we spread it out for 20 years, if we did 300,000 for 20 years, that's what that is.
So if we're upfronting another $4 million on this project between the developer and this project itself, that number is really 10 million?
We're not looking at doing 4 million for them. We're looking at
4 million total because you have, I think you need to be including the developer money in this as well, not just the sports complex. It's a total there's two projects going on, but they kind of feed off each other. That's why I'm asking if we're not going to be putting $1 or $2 million into the sports complex unless we're putting $1 or $2 million into the roads.
You're talking about the infrastructure project for all of Norwalk Central that Diligent would do?
Yep.
Yep.
I'm saying that since they play off each other, that's why I'm asking. So really, instead of 6 million, it's probably 10 million. Should be the number there.
I don't know that we would be connecting our incentive with the landowner's development of the infrastructure with the sports center. They would not be.
But one project doesn't happen without the other at this point in time, based on what you've told me so far.
Right.
Right. So then why wouldn't we be including them in both?
The focus on this part is really just the recreational facility. The other's infrastructure, the street, water, sewer.
But again, we're not doing, if we're leasing the building, we're putting 10 million into it, not 6.
But if we're owning the
But
building,
this
we're
is-
putting that same amount of infrastructure into it.
Right, so
So
if it
both
was owned, it's
sides
18.
don't include the infrastructure.
Right.
Right. I mean, this is Stephanie. It makes sense to me that and the infrastructure is separate. We were talking about providing that to Diligent, even if there were not a sports complex, because we need to have that road and that infrastructure in there to attract any tenant, whether it's a sports complex or not. So to me, they're separate things.
I think to David's point, though, once we've considered this and made a decision on it, then it'd be good for us to see the overall investment for the whole project, right? But that whatever that money is for infrastructure, David, it would be added the same to both sides, you know, if you were doing it that way. Because it'd still cost us the same no matter which way we went on this one.
Okay.
At the end of this, we do have that. We do show the two projects side by side because they are connected to each other. We know that the sports center is the anchor within the Norwalk Central area. And we know that, you know, the landowners of Hughes Century Crossing and Norwalk Central will not start the infrastructure without this type of a project needing to get started. There'd be no reason to put $8.5 million worth of infrastructure in without a project to get it started. So we do show those side by side in the end, but you guys, council asked us to show you what it would take to own a facility versus leasing it. So the infrastructure is separated out of that. And that infrastructure covers the entire Norwalk Central area, not just the sports center. So moving forward, just a couple more points there on the owning the structure versus leasing it. So a couple of things here, I need to move my faces, there we go. A couple of points here would be the increase of the city's debt service levy by $1.50 to $2. There'd be obviously no new tax value. We'd be reducing the amount of commercial land available in Norwalk. One of the other things that Jean pointed out was the 75% internal debt limit policy would not be able to be maintained. And just a couple other things that are a big deal, the higher costs due to bidding requirements. So anytime the city builds something, owns a construction project, everything, the expenses go up. And then also the citizen expectation of it. If we own a facility, it would be expected that the use of that would be next to nothing or free. Whereas when it's a private facility, people have to pay what it's worth. And that makes a big difference in operating costs. So then going into the private ownership, I won't go through too much of this. It's basically just kind of the same thing, but reversed, why there's pros for the private ownership side of it, mainly being that it's a commercial facility that can be taxed and we have less responsibility. So then we have 4 options here coming up for leasing. If we decide to go forward with the leasing option of this with these developers, there's 4 different options. They're all pretty similar, but they're just structured a little bit differently in terms of timing of how many years we do an incentive or do the lease rate, and a little bit difference in what would be done upfront for incentive cash. So the first option, if we lease the community center facility from them, we were looking at doing $1 million in a cash incentive grant at the time of certificate of occupancy. So although we call it up front, they don't actually receive it until they've built the facility and it's open. So that would be an incentive to them. The $300,000 guaranteed lease payment for 20 years, we're not looking at that as an incentive to them. It is a cost to us, so we have to determine how we pay for it. But we're not looking at that as coming out of the TIF generation 100% of what their TIF generation is, because we're looking at that as a separate thing. We're getting use of space for this lease payment. So we need to pay for it the same way we would pay for a lease of another facility for something else. So we would pay for it through a combination of, we could use some of the TIF that's generated from this project, but we'd also need to go into it knowing that we'd be using other funds like general fund or LOST, or a combination of those sources to pay for that lease payment for the use of the facility. So then for an actual incentive, a separate incentive for them, we were looking at 25% TIF rebate for 20 years. And we would require them to have a $5 million minimum assessment for the city to be able to repay ourselves that $1 million incentive, which we require the minimum assessments for any cash up front on projects. So that's option number one. So kind of pros and cons really on their end. It's not a lot of incentive. It's fairly minimal for the type of project or size of project, but it is a nice stretch of years. You know, we've got 20 years in there for them to be able to kind of count on, but it is fairly minimal. So then option two, and this one here just shows you the financial spreadsheet breakdown of that option one. So we have this $5 million value in here. It shows you what they'd be paying in taxes, us paying back the 1 million to ourselves, what their 25% rebate amount would be based on a $5 million assessment. So it sort of shows that, and at any time, Jean, feel free to bust in, because these are your spreadsheets.
Yeah, I will mention, I wouldn't mind, as we're getting into these spreadsheets, I think the thing that we need to really focus on is value, value, value. So the value of these projects, you know, whether if we give 1 million, 2 million, if we give 2 million, I think we need to make sure that the minimum assessment is there to at least pay us back first, because rebates can be paid after we pay ourselves, but value drives our ability to pay ourselves back and how much rebate will be available. And I do think the developers understand this. We've really tried to drive this home with them. We did put 4 million in the CIP, but that was, I will say, based on a concept that the sports complex would be valued around 18 million. So that's kind of why we've come down from that 2 million. And Diligent, the same thing. You know, their values have to dictate how much our ability to borrow and pay ourselves back first. So I think that's really important to think about, how much we're willing to put in up front, and quite possibly, if we want to do more, are we okay delaying some of our current CIP projects? Well, just a couple things that I'm thinking of right now. Go ahead, Holly.
Okay. So then option two is similar to the last one, a little bit different in terms of the cash up front, like Jean was saying. So if we were to increase the amount of cash that they would get at C of O to 2 million, we would still have the same lease payment amount for the same number of years. We'd have the same TIF rebate, same number of years. We would just be giving them a little bit more cash up front, but we would also require their minimum assessment to double, basically, like Jean was saying. So they would have to agree to a $10 million minimum assessment in order to get that 2 million at time of C of O. So that way we could pay ourselves back within the same time frame. So that's the difference there. So you might ask, well, why would they do that or not do that? Of course, they would want a higher cash up front. Every new business starting out, that's the scariest times the first several years. But the only reason they would maybe not be able to do this option is if they don't feel like their facility or their project is going to value in close to that 10 million. So then they'd be paying taxes on a $10 million facility, even if it's at 5 or 7. So that would be the only reason they would maybe not want to do that. But other than that, this shows a spreadsheet. I don't know, Jean, if there's anything on this one that you wanted to point out for that option too.
That just shows that if they did agree to a 10 million assessment, and we did, and this also shows, we generally have looked at 10-year payback. With this type of facility, we looked at possibly going a little bit longer. Actually, we've thought about using the full 20-year TIF. One, if they decided to double the value, agreed to that. And two, we think this is a high priority project. So we are willing to go a little bit longer. Three, we think the life of the project is at minimum 20 years. So that's why we extended that debt structure in that scenario.
Anybody have any questions on this one? Okay. So then option 3, again, pretty similar. The difference here, everything's the same as option 1 in terms of, we go back to the 1 million up front. We're still at the 300,000 lease payments for 20 years, but we increased their TIF to 50% instead of 25%, but we cut the years in half. So it's essentially the same thing. They're getting the same amount, just shorter term. So for us, it's good because then we're done paying that TIF, in 10 years versus 20. It's better for them because they get a little bit more during those first 10 years. So that's really the only difference. The con for us would be we'd have a little bit less TIF to use for other things. So that's the only difference on that one. We'll jump to that spreadsheet there. You can see what that difference would be. It just basically doubles the cash TIF amount that they would get each year, but half the years. So then the last option here is a little bit different. So this one, we're still at the 1 million cash up front. We're still at the same payment amount for our use of the facility, but we're doing 10 years instead of 20. But on this one, the difference is we increased their rebate to 75%, but cut those years in half as well. So instead of doing a small rebate for 20 years, we would do a 75% rebate for 10 years. Still the $5 million minimum assessment because we're just at that 1 million cash. So the point of this one, again, is to help them out a little bit more during those first 10 years when things are the toughest. They would have that to count on, a little bit higher rebate. We'd be done paying the rebate in 10 years versus 20. So we have full use of that TIF at year 11. So that's the difference with this one. And David did ask to add in a couple of things in here, which were good additions. So one is this little, in parentheses here, it says with the city option to renew for 5 years at the same rate. And so his point on that was, and feel free to jump in, David, but the point on that was, what if in 10 years we're not ready to go out and build our own facility yet, or we're not as far along as we think in terms of being prepared to go out on our own, and we want to stay there for another 5 years. So we would have a language written into the development agreement that we would have an option to renew for at least another 5 years at the same rate. And that was actually good because when I talked to the developers today, they really requested the same thing. So they wanted that option in there for both of us if we want to renew. So that was good. And then the other part was to max out the dollar amount. So if we do this higher percentage of rebate for a shorter number of years, David asked that we still max out the total dollar amount of that rebate. So, whatever that ends up being, if we want to set that at 1.5 million or 2 or whatever that ends up being, that, if their value comes in super high and all of a sudden we've got this really big TIF rebate amount going out for 10 years, this would kind of temper that down a bit to where we max that dollar amount. So it's 35% for 10 years or maxing out at X total. Do you guys have any questions on this option? For the breakdown there. This one, and again, we're just at that $5 million value, but if that goes up, which we assume it will be much more than that, then all these numbers change for the better.
Jean, I was wondering if when we're adding commercial businesses, all of this has been built in success is reeking. Which of these options gives us the best leeway? Everyone is going to ask for something. I don't care if it's a Culver's or whatever it is that's coming in. They're going to ask for something. Which of these gives us the leeway to still be able to work with someone? And which of these hamstring us the most?
Well, honestly, the best case scenario is if each place has a value that cash flows whatever they're asking. So we can pay ourselves back and give them rebates up to the maximum amount of their value. That's like best case scenario. And I think that for the majority of developments, and I think all of them, we've been doing that. This happens to be a unique situation. We want to get this going. Again, it's all value based. So for us, the best thing to do is try to get them to agree to a certain value. Although I know there's risk in that as well. They can agree to it and, walk away in 3 years if it's not making it. But generally, if they build it, because we don't give the money up front until after it's completed and they're occupying the facility. So I think a minimum assessment helps in that regard. I think if they want something in between option 2 and option 4. And you can see in option 4 there where it says remaining TIF. If we do the $1 million over 20 years, and I think you were there, weren't you there, Holly?
Yeah, there you go.
It's gone. Okay. You can see where the remaining TIF is negative. So we would have to draw from other TIF, and those amounts, we could potentially do it. So in the past, we've been able to easily draw from other TIF districts, but we have 3 main districts expiring in 2024 to the tune of about 150 million, which is awesome for our general fund, but not great for these types of agreements. So any new development at this point basically has to generate its own money. So to me, the best option is if we get them to do the 10 million, somewhere in the middle of 1 to maybe not 2, maybe not 1, maybe a little more, get those rebates in line with where we can generate enough. That's the perfect scenario.
If we needed to, what are the options as far as extending the life of any of the other TIF areas? Is it possible to still do that?
It is not. Not those 3 areas. Now, so what we did with Sunset Crest and that area with Clark and Diligent, both. No, not Diligent, because that was a new one. That was its own. But Clark, so that was actually in our original, that area was in our original TIF. But since it was new development, his retail strip and then the chiropractor and the dental office, we were actually able to carve that out into its own area. So we can't extend the existing, but if there's something new within it, we can carve it out and create a new one.
Okay, thank you.
And so when you guys give us these options, we can say, I guess what are you asking from us? You want us to pick an option, but isn't the other side get a big say in what the option is too? So if we pick an option, it may not be what they want.
Yeah, I think what we're looking at from you, from the city today, would be kind of a definitive answer of whether you really want to try to pursue ownership or if you're interested in going down this leasing path. And if you are interested in going down the leasing path, maybe just give your preferences of these options. So maybe you don't have a specific one. Maybe you say somewhere in between 3 and 4, try to run with that, try to negotiate the best deal with them and come back to us. That's kind of what we're looking for, is that we just kind of narrow this down a bit. They're aware of all of these options right now. They've kind of given some feedback. We're working with Robin and in the park department to, really specify what that use means and how many hours they can get and all of that. So we can really get into those nitty gritties with the developers, as long as we know from you all a general idea of, you know, we really hate option 1 and 4, but we really like 2 and 3, try to make that work and come back. That's what we're kind of looking for.
Holly, do you think it'd be a good idea just to take a first bite and just talk about, is council comfortable with a lease or ownership? How about just start with that part?
Lease for me.
Yeah, I would rather see a lease. There's a lot of reasons for that. One of them is that, you know, if we throw out $14 million to begin with, then I think we're going to have some challenges doing our CIP. And we might have to vote against things that we really do need, which wouldn't be comfortable. And the other thing is, okay, if we own it, then maybe some of the things that we'll want to have in there, I don't know this, but it might be like some kind of a fitness center or gym. Now, there is a fitness center in the community that's operating as a business. Okay, if we own this, we're going to be in kind of an awkward position because in essence, we're operating the competition. That's not good. Now, if a private individual owns that and they happen to sublease it to a fitness center, that's just the way the American system works. The other thing is we got to come up with some staff if we own that baby. And we got to come up with staff for a long time. So we got insurance, we got retirement, we got the salary that, you know, it's quite a burden over time. So in my mind, this is something that we can provide the amenities to our community, increase the quality of life here, which is one of our goals, but without having to cost us an arm and a leg. We can still continue to operate while we do this. And my preference, just going a step further, would probably be somewhere between 3 and 4. I like 4 because I like it over with sooner. Okay. But, you know, somewhere, and I'm sure you guys are going to make sure that the value is sufficient to be able to create a good deal for it. So lease would be where I intend to vote. Okay. And those are some of the reasons why. So I'll turn to the next council person and ask their thoughts.
Ali, since I started this whole purchase versus lease, let me go ahead and say that it appears the accounting rules are obviously much different for governmental than business on accounting for leases and that. I see no reason to go forward with owning it scenario. It just doesn't work. In addition to what Ed Cool said.
Well, thanks, Baker, for that glowing endorsement. I appreciate it, buddy.
Stephanie and David, do you want to weigh in?
Yes, I like the leasing option. I like option 4. I'm not going to reiterate everything Holly just said, but I just think it makes sense. It gives us time to look at how the community uses the space, whether it's a fit for us, what we need to do differently. You know, maybe we renew, maybe we need to build another facility. But in the meantime, we are getting some tax revenue from that, and we are getting the community what it has said very clearly it wants, which is a community center. I think that this lease option is the most viable alternative.
David?
I did see a note from David. No, I was gonna say, I saw a note in the chat from David that said lease.
Okay, sorry, I missed that one. So yeah, I was originally thinking ownership would probably be ideal, but once you start looking at the numbers,
Right.
lease makes a lot more sense. You know, I like option number 4. I'd like to see 2 options on number 4 for 5-year renewals, so we could renew it for an additional 10 years, up to 10 years at the same price. That would be nice. I think this also, leasing also gets us some experience with this type of a facility to be able to see what we want in this type of a facility once we decide to build.
Yeah.
So I'm up for the lease.
Sounds
Steph-
unanimous.
Stephanie, would you want to pass along what you heard from the park board the other night? About the lease versus own?
Um,
Or do you want Robin or I to?
I was gonna say it was lease. I don't know how much more detail you want me to go
No,
into.
that's fine. That,
Yeah, so they did approve to recommend to city council that they were looking at, they thought the lease option was the best option, and that we did not take a vote, but discussion was between lease option number 3 and number 4 is what unanimously those are the options that they liked. So
the main thing I would add to that I heard from the park board is this is a step in the right direction, but they know what we really need for this community is something larger. Now just isn't the right time. So this is a great thing to get us by until we can do that.
You know, 20 years from now, we might have a considerably larger economic engine.
Right.
And so we might be able to undertake a larger project. I think right now, this is about as much as we want to lift.
Did you get what you needed from us, Holly?
I did.
One thing,
I don't know if you guys,
Holly, what terrifies me is I didn't like seeing those negative TIF remaining numbers. The 75 makes me nervous. I would like that to hover more around the 50. Other than that, and try to get the assessed value as high as possible.
So Brian,
Yes.
I ran the math on the total for that remaining, the TIF. That's just it comes out to a positive 540 over the 20 years.
But in the meantime, in the first
The
10, though,
first 10, it's a negative 250-ish, 250, 260, somewhere in there.
okay.
And then you recoup that in 3 years, essentially, after that. So by
Okay.
year 13, you're back to zero, year 14, somewhere in there.
So I shouldn't be as nervous as I am.
I looked at that too and had to run the numbers to see where we came back from negative to positive on it. So yes, I agree with you on that.
All right. Thank you.
yes, thank you so much. That's great direction. I think we'll be able to go back to the developers and Robin and I and Jackie, and we'll be able to kind of hammer out the details, because as you know, lots of small things will change between now and the final time we have a development agreement in place. But those are the details we could now really start to focus on. We have a little bit better idea of the structure. So I appreciate that. There are a few more slides. We don't have to go through those right now. If you don't want, I can certainly send this to you all. It just kind of breaks down what the overall Norwalk Central infrastructure will end up coming back to you looking like, and then just kind of some general other comparisons of what everybody's responsible for. But I could send that to you or discuss it now. It's up to you.
Holly, would you do me a favor, and can you run that scenario 4 with the value of say 7 million and then 10 million? I'm just curious to know if the assessed value is actually higher, what is the payback period?
Run it right now.
Is that French or just a bad microphone?
That's your microphone. Gene, we can't understand what you're saying. Sorry.
Oh, shoot.
Try again.
I think so.
I'll try again.
Here we go.
That's the 1 million up front, correct?
Right. Right.
95% rebates.
We're still looking at Holly's screen.
Yeah, right.
I'm throwing numbers in my spreadsheet because I can change the value and it changes everything easily.
Yeah, and it was a 300,000 lease for 10 years.
Yeah. Are you trying to get to a break even where there's no negative numbers?
No, I'm just wondering when it becomes less than 20 years for payback.
Are you talking about the debt or the rebates or both?
You broke up, Gene.
She said for the rebates or both. I guess both. I'm just curious to see what it looks like. Just plug in 7 million. I'm just wonder.
Gene, you could probably share your screen if.
I'll stop sharing, Gene, so you can share it if you need to.
Okay. 7 million is the same. It just makes that amount much less.
Okay.
So it takes that amount from. What was that? I'm trying to share my screen. You know how good I am at doing that. Gosh darn it.
That's 2.
Okay, so we had the 5 in there. So it takes that 25,000 negative number to 10,000 a year.
Okay.
Still pays off and it doesn't start paying back till the 11th year, but it helps. It helps.
Right. Okay.
My question before we go off topic, did you guys decide the upfront amount? Is there, I know we talked about 1 million, we talked about 2 million. Can we land somewhere in the middle as a max?
I think if they want, or if they agree to a $5 million minimum assessment, it's probably $1 million. Or if they agree to a $10 million minimum assessment, it's $2 million.
I like that theory.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. That was the one thing I wanted to get. And then if we talk to these people, just get the rebate percentages to work within the value generated was what I'm thinking.
Yeah, so we're kind of having a little discussion up here, Gene. And this kind of goes back to my comment earlier, right? We can say what we want, but the other player is a significant factor. And if our goal is to make this happen, I'm hesitant to say we should set hard and fast limits right now. Certainly, we can get our ballparks, but I'm hesitant to say we should set this is our max kind of things now, because we're still, we're just at the point where we have all agreed to lease, and right, that's just the very beginning of the discussion.
Perfect.
Basically,
So,
you want to see an option that works. Right. However you get to it, right?
Yeah, it's got to be good for everybody.
Whether that's sliding the value up or sliding the repayment down, whatever it is, right?
Yeah, I think Holly go and do
Yeah.
their thing at this point.
Let them have discretion between them to figure it out.
Yeah. So
Perfect.
Holly and Gene.
so my final question was going to be, are you okay with some creative financing? So
Yes.
I don't
Legal
mean-
creative financing.
Yeah.
I don't want anybody to be confused.
No. You're taking that wrong. So
I've been reading the newspaper. I saw that creative financing.
I want to make a point on that.
From G. Conservative.
Point on that. When that 150 rolls off TIF, we'll have about $1 million in our general fund. Would you be willing to take some of that money to offset debt payments if we had to? That's what I meant. Things like that. Legitimate.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No raising money by tasing people.
The chief could make a little bit of money on Saturday night. That
Don't carry a taser.
What would be your debt payments? I'm confused here. You mean going forward?
Yes, I mean totally legal, but maybe a different type of financing that we've used in the past. So if we had to use some general fund dollars, because we'll be getting quite a bit more off from that TIF, we could utilize some of that toward a debt payment. Something like that, if we really want to get this project off the ground.
Right. Maybe that's a good discussion for the finance committee.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on that one?
Not unless you guys wanted to talk about the infrastructure side of that with Diligent. That could be another time too.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind spending a few minutes just to get an overview of that whole thing. I think it's kind of like David's talking about,
Okay.
so we've got it fresh in our minds, you know, what the overall situation is.
You want to put up the last page of your slides, Holly?
Yep.
Yeah, if you do that, and then maybe send us the rest of them or something.
Okay, so you guys are seeing my numbers again here, this.
Yep.
Okay, so bigger picture here, kind of separating the two, but they do tie together like David said. So one really was not going to happen without the other at this point. Diligent or the landowners will not be building all of this infrastructure without at least one
You're going
major project.
Swedish on us, Holly.
Can you hear me? I am
Barely.
Swedish, so.
Hey, try to turn your video off.
Okay, perfect. I like that on anyway. Rid of that. Oh crap, I lost my, what are you guys seeing now?
We
A
can see
map?
your-
Okay. Perfect, okay.
Map.
So perfect. Can you guys hear me okay though?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so with the two projects tying together, yet they're separate because they are separate groups of developers. But so what we're looking at here on the left-hand side, that just kind of summarizes the ranges that we could be looking at with our package with the sports project developers. Okay, so then over on the right-hand side is the overall, the bigger Norwalk Central project, which you guys saw a few weeks ago with the draft concept that Adam put together for us. And, you know, it would include the civic component, all the other retail, the sports center, the outdoor park, you know, all of that goes into this Norwalk Central area. So the infrastructure for that entire network would cost about $8.5 million. We got updated estimates for all of that. Previously, if you all remember, we had a development agreement approved with Diligent to put in Chatham. So they were planning to do, and I'll move to the map, I can jump back to this. But that old development agreement still in place was for them to put in all of Chatham. And we had $900,000 set aside to pay them upfront. I'm saying in air quotes because they would get the $900,000 once they complete Chatham, but that's their considered upfront portion. Then they would receive another 1.2 million over time through TIF based on the TIF generation from their other commercial developments. So the first commercial project that they built that would go towards that, they had a $5 million minimum assessment to get the rest of that 1.2 over time. So the first project that went into that was that Hughes Century Crossing building in here, which has Mahalos and all of that. So then we have not activated that yet, or they haven't started receiving any payments on that yet because they have not started Chatham. So I'm going to jump back here real quick to that. So now that we have a bigger idea of what's going to happen in this whole area, and we, you know, are really close with the sports project kind of being that first major anchor in there, we're looking at doing either a second development agreement with them or just redoing, you know, getting rid of that first one and doing a whole new one. Now that we have the total infrastructure network, we understand how it's supposed to lay out. We understand how the lots will be. We're getting close to the PUD process. So with that, we would maybe come back to you guys and ask for a little bit more upfront. We have that 900,000 set aside. We would maybe ask you to increase that to 1.5. So another 600,000, just so they're not taking the whole 8.5 million risk right out of the gate. They'd still have to complete the construction of the infrastructure to get that 1.5. And then the rest of that, they would get in TIF rebate over the 20-year stretch. And of course, they would have to have enough increment from their new commercial projects to get that money back. If they don't have enough increment, they don't get the rest of that infrastructure cost back. So it is a risk, pretty big risk for them. But when we come back, when we do finally have this sort of agreed upon package with a sports campus, we'll also come back to you hopefully at the same time with the Norwalk Central infrastructure development agreement with Diligent, because they really need to run at the same time. One needs the other. So that's kind of what we're looking at overall here. And I think Gene did put 4 million in the CIP for this kind of whole area. So if we do 2 towards the sports and 2 towards, you know, the infrastructure side, that equals that 4. The rest would have to come back and rebate based on their TIF generation. So any questions on that?
Yeah, thanks. That gives a better, that kind of clarifies it in my mind, what we're looking at overall here.
And Ed, I did throw this one in here really quickly because you did ask for this. And this just kind of lays out everybody's responsibility in this bigger Norwalk Central area. But I'm calling this phase one, being the whole infrastructure for all of it, plus the sports campus. The reason why we're calling that phase one is because phase two will include all of the other commercial, our city civic components, the parks, that kind of stuff that'll come later. So this first kind of phase one is the most important. It gets our infrastructure in there and the anchor in there. So over on the left here, it breaks down really what the city's responsibility would be overall. So we would have the repayment of the infrastructure through the TIF generated from that entire area, commercial. We would have we would potentially provide a portion of the infrastructure costs upfront to the landowner that's building the infrastructure. Potentially provide cash incentive at time of C of O to the sports developer. $300,000 annual lease payment for the use of the facility for 10 to 20 years. We negotiate on, and then TIF rebate incentive to the sports developer. Again, we've got that range in there because we know we can negotiate within that range. So then business developer, which is the sports developer, their responsibility would be to invest anywhere between 18 and 24 million to construct the indoor sports and rec facilities, including the courts, private tenant lease space, they say fields, in the fields, provide space to the city for a negotiated lease amount to include specific time slots and days, amount of space to be negotiated between Robin's team and the developers. Agree to an option for the city to renew the space at the end of each predetermined lease length. So whatever lease length we choose, we'd have that language in there that we could renew it. And also agree to language providing the city the first right of refusal. So if they do decide someday down the road that they want to sell it, we would have the first option to buy it. Or if, God forbid, they went belly up and couldn't pay for it, we would have the option to buy out that note. So that would be the business developer's responsibilities. And then finally, the landowner, bigger, diligent landowner developer, their responsibility would be construction of the infrastructure, including entire network within Hughes Crossing and Norwalk Central, will be 8.5 million. They would need to take the risk up front to pay for and construct that infrastructure, which will also serve the civic and public components. They would deliver a shovel-ready site to the sports developer at an agreed upon discounted rate, which we've already discussed, at 22 acres, 22 to 25 acres, and then develop or sell commercial parcels for development according to the city's master plan and PUD. So that kind of lays that out, Ed. I hope that's what you're looking for, but we can certainly clean this up and get more specific with it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. I appreciate it. That's helpful to me. Would you mind sending these slides to me?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Other questions for Holly or Jean?
Thanks, Holly and Jean.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the hard work.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Okie dokie. Item 7J, fireworks ordinance changes for 2021. So Luke Paris has been working on changing our fireworks ordinance for 2021. He has some options that he'd like to discuss with council to get direction for a final draft of the new ordinance that he'll bring back next time.
Correct. So just a quick overview, we reviewed our fireworks stuff last fall, had some council discussion on it. We came back and wrote a draft. When I took all that information from council and kind of compiled it all and added it together and then kind of ran through where I know we've had fireworks stands in the past, it basically resulted in you not being able to do fireworks stands in town. It didn't appear that that was probably the intent of council after that discussion. It's just the aggregate of all that together kind of limited that. So Jim and I sat down and looked at together. We also looked at some other communities. And really, I think as we're getting more into allowing fireworks sales or not, or however we want to do it, we probably need to start looking at incorporating it more into our zoning than kind of the initial way that we'd incorporated it just within the fireworks part of our code. We kind of did that early on because there was some uncertainty as far as how the state language worked, and then there was some rulings on other cities' ways they regulated, and basically said, well, no, we can definitely regulate these things via zoning. So that's kind of where Jim and I have ended up on how we should probably do this is just kind of pull back and look at it as a temporary sales structure in general, and then just work that through our regular zoning ordinance. So that would be a somewhat substantial change to what you've seen. I mean, certainly we can incorporate a lot of the criteria that you guys would want to see in that. But really, I guess our first question just is, what are we thinking about fireworks as a temporary sales structure? Is that something we want to still try to allow, incentivize, have happen here? Or is that something that we want to restrict more? If we put it into zoning districts, that really gives us a lot of control over where it's going to happen. So if we really want to say, we're not a big fan of having this in town, we can put it in zoning districts that it's less likely to happen in versus, what we're currently doing, which is allowing it in most of our commercial districts. Other than that, just what types of other aesthetic qualities might you want to look at? Really what Jim and I talked about was we need to stop focusing so much on just fireworks sales tents and look at it as a temporary sales structure and apply that code kind of equally to all temporary sales structure. So that way we have a consistent application. Jim's concern over that was the way we currently have been doing stuff was we're looking very closely at fireworks. And so, if a fireworks company decides to cry afoul of that, are we treating them fairly as opposed to other types of temporary sales? Even though we don't have a whole lot of other temporary sales in town, we're kind of singling them out right now. So we can certainly apply a lot of the standards, the definition of a sales tent and all that stuff. We can wrap that into a temporary sales structure format into the regular zoning code. And any other restrictions as far as like the metal structures and all those things, we can write that all into it as a temporary sales structure. But so those are really kind of the things we wanted to get out of you guys tonight before we kind of write up a finalized version is really we're thinking we're going to go a different direction on it as far as how we're going to incorporate it in the code. I think it gets us to the same spot, assuming that we are still wanting to allow them in our commercial districts. I guess that's the big question was really the intent to not allow them based on the codes that and the discussion we had back then. That wasn't my interpretation of things, but certainly you guys were the ones that had the discussion. So
it wasn't my intent to not allow them, but it was my intent to significantly limit or restrict the density and the appearance.
Okay.
And I would say the same thing. I would rather not have any, but that's not realistic. So, I mean, I don't mind them being in C2 where they are now. I just wish that they would be spaced out. You talked about, I don't want metal containers. I want the setbacks to be complied with. I want our signage ordinance to be complied with, so no big blow up gorillas. And I just want to make sure that, if they're in a parking lot, say in front of Ace Hardware, that there's still adequate flow for cars, that, we're not going to end up with people not finding a parking space or people getting into an accident because you're trying to get in there with cars going in and out for the fireworks. I know it's just temporary, but for those businesses, Ace Hardware, so the chiropractor and the Dollar General store, should they really have to deal with a lot of traffic congestion in their parking lot that lets their other customers be inconvenienced? So that's where I'm focused.
Yeah,
I like what.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I like what Stephanie said. And I think the prime example of that not occurring was the Wynn's parking lot. When that tent went up there, and I don't know who's the profiteer of that tent, but that parking lot is already full and a mess on a regular everyday basis, and then you put a camper and a fireworks tent in that location, and that was a quagmire. I absolutely hated every second of looking at that parking lot.
Well, I like the approach of taking it for a temporary sales location because it could be anything. I mean, it doesn't have to be fireworks. If somebody's got a, traveling sushi sales, as an example, right? And they're gonna set a tent up in the middle of the parking lot, it's gonna create the same set of problems though, right? Because we're talking about traffic flow, talking about appearance, talking about just common sense stuff. So I think if you can address those things that way, that is probably the preferred way, because that's certainly fairer. And it would knock down those same problems if we're dealing with some other item, you know what I mean? Rather than the nature of what they're selling, right? We could apply that to avoid having that problem with anything. Couldn't we?
So one of the issues that we have is that our set allowed time to ignite fireworks is June 29th through July the 8th, I believe.
Sounds right.
The problem that we have is that the tents can go up June 15th, somewhere around in June 9th.
It's that, I mean, that's all state. I think it's
It's
several weeks earlier than when we get
by the state, by the state, and people don't understand that I can go buy fireworks, but I can't light them. They don't understand that. I don't blame them. If I went to go buy fireworks, I thought if I can buy them, I should be able to light them off. So one of the things that I
Because you never went to another state to buy them and bring them back here where you knew you
yes, I
couldn't
did.
light them off.
Oh, yes, I have. Statute of limitations is over.
Tasing people anyway.
He just bought it.
So one of the problems that I thought we were going to address is that, okay, if it's not overt that I can find this tent, that I can go buy fireworks, that I can take home and immediately light, I'm going to narrow my, I think we want to use that to narrow down the time that people expect that they can light fireworks. I thought that's one of the goals that we had, but I'm not, this is up for discussion.
That would be ideal, but I don't know if that's
Yeah, I don't
within our
think you
purview.
can't, we can't limit the hours or the dates of sales. Okay, the way we can limit it and address it is through zoning. That's what the courts have said, that we can address it through zoning and say what zoning districts fireworks can be sold in. And then you can make some laws that we believe to be able to limit temporary structures and sales structures. And it's going to apply to everybody. It's going to apply to, way beyond fireworks, because we cannot legally section out fireworks other than through zoning and make limitations. We can't say, okay, if there's a fireworks tent, you can't put a camper next to it. But, if there's a plant sale, you can. It's,
Can we?
So, but we should be able to say selling plants is different than selling things that go boom.
we can't, the state code addresses how fireworks can be sold. It addresses safety requirements on how fireworks are sold. And state law says we can't contradict.
But we can limit their sales to particular zoning areas.
Yep.
And if those particular zoning areas are on the southern border of our town, as I'm going to Ace Hardware, I don't see the tent anymore.
Right.
I don't know that people aren't gonna buy them. I don't know that they're gonna go seek them out.
Okay, but this.
Oh, yes, they will.
Isn't this, right, isn't this the same? People will go, people who want to get fireworks will go and spend their money in Des Moines where they can get fireworks and come here and set them off. It's not like people, I mean, people who had to go across the city or state border went across the state border to get fireworks to bring them back here. This is, 5 minutes instead of 2 hours. I'm not necessarily a fan of fireworks, and I certainly want to protect our city and how it looks. But I want to take advantage of that revenue source that our neighbors are taking advantage of.
Okay. All right.
But I think in order to deal with what you're talking about, Mayor, which I think is a core problem for a lot of our angst of fireworks, is that the state has to address that, because the state has to shorten that period. And the only reason I think, well, this is my opinion, but the only reason I think our legislature set those days of it is a good, strong lobby from the fireworks people. They needed X number of days to make money, or it's not worth doing. But I think it'd be nice to see the legislature test that, shrink that down, so it's not such a long period of time. I think therein lies the trouble.
Yeah, but they're not going to do that.
Right, John Q. resident suffers. Most people would say if you listen to the chatter. John Q. resident suffers, but John Q. business owner, John Q. state revenue, John Q. city revenue gains tremendously.
Yeah, that's true.
One I know is a dumb idea. I'm going to bring it up anyway. But two ideas. One, could part of our location requirements just be that we'll allow temporary sales, but they have to be in an M1 district before a certain date?
We cannot limit the dates.
Okay.
Well,
So that was a dumb idea. The other idea, could we require as part of sales that they have to issue a little white and with red print on it, these are the dates of detonation?
And
This has got to go out
require
there.
signage to be put up there, I would think that
yeah,
that
I've
would be.
seen other ordinances require that they have signage posted on the fence saying.
I'm talking like something that physically they've got to give to them what they're
Fixed to
received.
the box.
Yeah,
And I realize that's hard to enforce, but I think
I don't think it's hard to enforce at all, as a matter of fact. I think any
I think-
brand stop by.
And any
I
of
think
those,
that's a great idea, and I was going to suggest the same thing. So good for saying it.
the more limitations and requirements we put on it, the more you push the issue of legality. Keep in mind, the last litigation that went through, it was challenging zoning and all kinds of things. And the courts said, no, you can control it through zoning. And it wasn't a slam dunk for either side at that point in time, but the court came down saying, no, zoning is a general function of the city. The city has the right to, zone as they want, and they can decide what zoning it goes into. The more restrictions that we get that are fireworks specific, the more we're pushing that limit of contradicting the direct Iowa law that, where the state has forced us into allowing sales. Right now, the code is, if we remember, right, we can control the ignition of it. We can control the lighting of it within our city limits. The Iowa code allowed us to do that, or didn't prohibit us from doing that. But with the sales, it's strict. It says sales are going to be allowed. And when the cities first came in with the zoning restrictions, it was unknown. The court case came through and said, yeah, you can do zoning, and everybody jumped in and did it. And I believe that's one of the reasons why we saw it so congested down here, is because our neighbors to the north, they said M1 only.
Right.
So we saw the congestion down here, but you're gonna see me turning down everything other than what's generally applied to all temporary structures. So if we say, okay, it's got to be a commercial grade tent, well then, anytime we have temporary sales of any item, it's got to be commercial. So we've got to look at this as far as all temporary things. If all of our discussion is against fireworks, well, state law doesn't allow us to do that other than through zoning.
But that's probably a reasonable thing But wouldn't it seem reasonable that we could post what our legal requirements
I
are?
think so.
And it would be that way, depending on the nature of whatever product they were selling. If they sold another product, you know, some other vendor, and we had an ordinance that dealt with that specific product, when it could be used or whatever, wouldn't we also want to post the ordinance that limits
I
it?
think we can post a sign. I've
So, I
seen
mean-
most ordinances have that restriction saying, okay, when you come to the town, you need to post our rules regarding igniting.
Yeah, so as a general rule, whatever could apply to other types of sales, right, is probably reasonable then.
But the more imposition we have, there's more, you know, it's a gray area. There is not, I'm not gonna be able to point to you a statute under the Iowa code saying you can put a sign up on the post and say that, you know, and that's legal. There isn't gonna be something in the Iowa code that says you can't require a sticker on each individual thing, but there is on each individual sale, or you know, there isn't a code out there that says that specifically. What the code says is that when the state legislature has authorized the sale of a product statewide, we can't contradict that.
Okay, now I gotta think that requiring them to put, I didn't think about that, but a sticker on everything, these are the dates of detonation, that's pretty cool. But I would think that's a pretty minimal ask of them, or even to have a bunch of things printed out that says, hey, you know, every time they sell, here are the dates of detonation. We're not restricting the sale, it's just one minor addition. I mean, I would think that they would be okay with that.
Yeah, but it's all incrementalism, and that's.
But if we wrote that, just asking, if we wrote that in such a way that whatever the product is that's being sold, if the city has ordinances that govern the use of that product, right, that we ask that they distribute a document that we might provide that limits or advises the customer of the limitations that our city has on their use.
Yeah, but that's pretty tough. I mean.
But couldn't you make that
Pretty
apply
hard
to
to
a lot
do
of
that.
different
I
things?
mean, so do we issue letters of warning for fertilizing to avoid pollution of your groundwater? And
if we had an ordinance on it.
Yeah, we do have an ordinance.
we
on
do
it.
have an ordinance
And
on it, but I mean, we could really,
I think if we put the sign.
So that could be a rabbit hole. couldn't it?
Signage.
it could be a big rabbit hole.
Just a sign at the door.
Signage.
Yeah, sign at the door.
All
Yeah,
right,
Just a big sign at the door.
I like that. Let's do that. No rabbit hole.
I have asked in previous years, the vendors to hand each customer a paper produced by the police department that says when the legal times of detonation were, and they refused both times I asked. I asked the guerrilla tent people the very first year. Their answer was, I have to ask the corporate office. And when they did, they said no. And then I asked the tent that was in front of the Yellow House just north of El Dorado. And they basically said, heck no, in stronger terms.
Yeah. Well, that's because they're corporate advisors. I mean, they're very sensitive to these restrictions.
Well, and I think, right, if part of the ordinance says that you have to include a sign, you know, prominently posted, right? Because for instance, food trucks, right, you have to have your license. Elevators, you have to have your license prominently posted. I mean, all of these other things you have to prominently post. And so I think that that's not terribly intrusive, and that could be a requirement that their corporate doesn't get to say, we're not going to do that, or we get to say, then you're not putting it up here.
I like that though.
But how do you apply that to all temporary structures then?
Well,
If we have it,
Only temporary structures where we have a time limit associated with.
right,
Okay.
right.
the use of the product or whatever.
Because already, and I go back to like food trucks, they have to have their food and vendor licenses prominently posted. It's, to me, this is the same thing.
I had a text message.
Could be written the same way, I should say.
A good example, I had a text message from somebody that said, what about the farmer's market? So again, that's, you know, we're talking about tents, that's where
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
could be, that's, I didn't even think about it, but that's a good
That's
comparison.
when I was giving the example of the tent.
Can we exclude the farmer's market? specific? Didn't we exclude the farmer's market specifically when we did the food truck ordinance?
We did, yes.
Yes.
And we excluded them from something else. And then, and in my mind, you could do that in this instance as well.
Right. Well, and part of what you would want to do is we'd have to come up with a definition of what we consider a temporary sales structure. Jim and I, when we talked about it, farmer's market was one thing that came up. The other thing that came up was a Girl Scout selling cookies, or a kid with a lemonade stand, right? Like,
oh, the lemonade stand. You're
Yeah,
not
we
going
don't wanna
after
be the
them,
city
are you?
that decides that we're going to start regulating kids' lemonade stands and Girl Scout cookies. So you, at some point, you have to have something that says, you know, a temporary sales structure is something that is at a location, you know, for a set more than 24 hours. And then we apply that standard to that.
Yes.
And so under that circumstance, the farmer's market wouldn't meet that test.
Right.
Because it's there for the day.
No,
Well,
but, you know, the icy, whatever that, what's this? that-
Tropical snow.
Tropical snow, that would,
That could potentially,
even
depending on how we
maybe,
worded that,
you
may.
know, Fairway's house on the side of it where they have plants. Once in the
right,
spring
when
of the
they
year.
put up the, yeah, and the hardware store.
Of course. So I think it's, you know, and technically, even if they put something up temporarily out of Bedwell's garden.
Right, so I feel like we've kind of gone, like, kind of down a bit of a rabbit hole
I think
because,
so.
right, we're talking about what kind of zoning. We could have these what ifs discussions all day long, I guess. is
What
I'm saying.
I think maybe what I'd like to get out of the conversation is that if the council consensus is that they do not want to limit it as far as the zoning classification to like a industrial only, then Luke and I can get back together and put some, you know, reasonable restrictions on temporary structures in general to maybe alleviate some of the issues we have that sometimes occurs when we get all these extra temporary structures in town regarding, you know, garbage and things like that. And figure out, you know, a way to do that, but it's not gonna be pointed directly at fireworks. And I think, you know, even our discussions when we look at that, I think the council needs to consider that also, because if 100% of our discussion is regarding fireworks, you know, really we're pointing at that. We need to have legislation that is neutral.
So my 2 cents is, I think that it should be C2 and M1. I think that the aesthetics should be the same, whether it's in C2 or M1. I think that whatever aesthetics we decide, in terms of looking at the bullet points here on this, that's my 2 cents.
How can we inject some common sense in some parking lots that can hold it and some that can't? I don't know how to do that other than number of spaces.
Yeah, that's how we would have to do it. We would have to, but doesn't that effectively knock out everybody?
Yeah, that's, I mean,
Yeah,
so
that's
Jim
what
and I are we're gonna have to like come up with an idea with it and then see how it works with those 2 lots.
But
Because
couldn't we do something like dictate in some fashion, traffic flow or, you know, the space around it that's available or something like that? I mean, couldn't we?
The fellow tenants should have put up a stink enough to hate it. And, you know, unless they're all splitting the profits, I have no idea how these transactions occur.
I spoke with 2 of the major ones that you brought up, Brian. I spoke with Ace. I spoke with both the local manager and the owner of Ace. A local manager, I specifically asked him about the traffic or the parking issues.
Mm-hmm.
That it hasn't been an issue for them. And of course, the owner, it makes note of that conversation. And then the same thing on the Fairway side. They didn't have an issue with the traffic. Now, that doesn't speak for.
Yeah, I have an issue with
winds
the
and-
traffic every single day.
Oh my golly, yeah.
It's a horrible setup, in my opinion.
It is.
And it is.
It's bad.
Days there's not been an accident. So
It's a
I
cluster.
appreciate that they haven't had a problem with it. The other thing though is you're talking about the people, you're talking to the businesses that financially benefit the most. So I too would be curious to hear what, you know,
And it's tough.
Rocher, what Dollar Tree, Dollar
I don't know.
Dollar Tree.
Yeah, whatever.
You know, what those other little businesses along that strip over at Fairway, I would be curious to hear what they say, just as an aside.
Yeah, the nail place and Wins and the financial place, all of those. I would be raising such a stink if they did that in my driveway. I would be really angry.
Well, I want to get back to that discussion that we were having about Jim writing legislation to promote common sense. I don't think he could do that, you know?
I just want to know where my velvet paintings can be
Out of a
sold.
job.
I just want to know where I can peddle my velvet paintings. That's all I want.
There you go. There you go.
So do you have any direction, or do you still feel like?
No, I feel like that sends us in the right way. I think, you know, our main thing was, we didn't get the impression that the direction from council was we don't want them here, but, you know, also that's kind of what it shook out. So I just want to make sure that we didn't bring something back to you that you guys were like, well.
I would say we should try what you've got in mind.
Okay.
And if we think we still got some issues, we can always tighten things up or look at it differently.
Yeah. And
right.
Also, it's a changing thing every year, and I think it's appropriately a changing thing every year because.
Yeah, but it would be nice if we got to some comfort, consistent area.
And Luke, this is something we talked about just after this last summer, that now that we have a code enforcement individual, I think enforcement is critical this year.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think though also you have to keep in mind there were some enforcement things like with tent last year that we really didn't have time to even go in and get an injunction to stop. I mean, it was like 2 days before the 4th, and it was like that darn tent's up there, and it's
So write some,
you know,
write some fines into the ordinance.
Yeah,
and
and that's-
just slap them down.
Yeah.
but we're gonna have.
Put a big stick in that ordinance.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think every year we need to look and see if we do have issues with compliance. I mean, that's indicative of maybe it doesn't belong in that zoning district.
Huh? Per day, yeah. State law says minimum's $250 per day if you're not. So might as well write that in there. If you're not following our ordinance, you're gonna get fined $250 per day.
That'll have an impact.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
we'll work on something.
And Luke, I made some notes too as I was kind of listening.
Anybody willing to go the distance and say, if you can light them, you can fly them?
What?
I don't know what that means.
I don't know what.
So expand the time that you can actually light them from when you can sell them.
No,
We will have a revolt.
No.
no.
We already have a revolution.
No, we have some loudly dissenting.
We have some good dates. We have good dates.
All right. I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Brave person.
That way I could start lighting them earlier than I do. And
I
I
would
will.
invitation to come over to your house and light them off there.
Say again, David?
Is that an open invitation to come over and light off at your house now? to us, not to the general public, you know.
You can come over and sit out in the street and watch them coming out from behind my house. How's that? Okay. Have we sufficiently killed that one?
I hope.
It's dead.
All right.
It probably is a dead horse.
Let's move on then. Item 8. Council inquiries and staff updates. Luke Paris. Tell us about
Yeah.
solar panels.
Just one other, just get some council thoughts or anything. Well, going to be writing. I've not written anything yet on solar panels. Done a review of other codes and stuff, and so just trying to get a gauge on how complex you want. I've seen it from just define what a solar plant panel is and then allow it someplace, to West Des Moines, which gets into the details of how much wattage and voltage the panel creates and all this stuff. personally, I'd rather be on the simpler side. So I see Jackie shaking her head there.
Yes, I agree. Less is more.
Okay, so we'll
I
probably
would-
go that route with it, and then we'll bring you some options as far as the rear yard and rooftop, unless there's like a really strong desire that no, we don't want to consider rear yard stuff at all.
You know, one of
We
the,
can have that debate
one of
more when we have the ordinance, but
I think rear
one,
yard.
one of the
yard's
issues
big
that
enough.
came up in that instance was at a rear yard, right?
mm,
And again, it goes back kind of to aesthetics, right?
Yep.
And I guess I wouldn't mind seeing if there's a way to address it without getting too complicated. You know, because I don't think that it's reasonable for a neighbor to be able to take an action like that in a residential area.
okay.
And I don't know exactly how you would address that. But I think we need to protect each other from some giant thing appearing in the backyard.
Yeah.
The most you can probably, I mean, it's going to look like a solar panel is going to look like a solar panel. So the most you can probably do is say so many square feet of said thing. And that's like how West Des Moines does theirs, not to get into the weeds, but they say you can't have a system that creates more than this amount of power. And then that effectively limits the size of it. I don't know why they do it that way, but.
Okay.
Because right now, our current,
I think you just say size of it because the technology changes.
if you looked at an accessory structure, right now our accessory structures such as garage and stuff, don't they have a limitation on size as percentage of?
Percentage of space, you have to maintain a certain amount of like yard space in your yard.
Right.
And then, yeah.
Right, but the resident that is seeking to do this has plenty of yard space.
Yard.
Right.
And they could put, so, right, I mean, if they follow that, they could put up a
But I think it's also a
huge array.
percentage of the house.
Yep.
isn't it?
So yeah, that one side of it was you can only cover up so much of your yard and not have open space. The other side of it is there's like a maximum size, and it's like if you were to build a shed without getting a special use permit, you can't make it bigger than the footprint of your house.
Okay,
So you know
Well,
that counts as the
that's
maximum.
still
limit.
big.
But it is.
Right.
So-
Somebody get size.
Size in this particular case. And right, it truly affects me zero, because I can't really see it from my house and.
See, and I don't think,
But-
once again, when you have this legislation, it's not necessarily, you can certainly use the current issue as an example,
Right.
but you need,
But
this
we
is gonna be
can't
applied.
target this
We
resident.
can't target this resident,
Right.
just keep in mind that resident could put a big garage in that backyard exactly where they want the solar panel. It could be probably much
Yes.
more intrusive than the panel itself.
I don't think, I think it would stop them. That's an
Yeah.
ODA issue.
I think the covenants should be.
I know,
I
but it's
agree.
not a city
But
issue.
if you go out
Right.
to the city generally, I just want you to take a run at,
Yeah.
right? See if you can put that in.
Good luck.
Well,
How about real-
I would be in favor of keeping it simple and just looking at general yard setback, kind of like we did with wind generation. Because I mean, the situation that was in front of us recently, well, not in front of us, but that came up recently, that's really a homeowners association. That's really a specific neighborhood association issue. I mean, there are other people who have large lots, who maybe are more in a rural setting that would have ample place to put it, and it wouldn't really ruin anybody's view because they're not looking across that neighbor's yard. So I think just maybe make it an ordinance that is general and applies to like 90% of the properties, and not trying to get into the details of homeowner views. So, okay, so like at Legacy or Echo, maybe you don't want to have solar panels block your view of the golf course, but that's really something for Echo Valley and Legacy associations to deal with, I think, not the city to deal with.
Right.
Well, I'll disagree with you on that one a little bit,
Me too, but.
Okay.
we
but
can-
that's all right.
we can
Your
let them
point's
figure
well
it out.
taken. Your point's well taken.
I've got enough to be able to move forward with it.
All right. Cool. Anything else?
Just mention real quick, Ed kind of mentioned it on the parkland purchase. But the goals from the parkland study, coupled with what we did with our subdivision regulations, that purchase is like 65% of the land we said we needed by 2030. So we're in 2021 and we're more than halfway there. So that's good. And then in addition to that, our subdivision change, getting that increased acreage per household is going to keep us pace. So, we are now with that purchase right in the middle of what the metro suburbs are for parkland per 1,000 people, and well on pace to get what we're saying we need by 2030. So it's good stuff.
Look at that.
Developers should love hearing that.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Luke.
I have a whole list, but I'm only going to cover two things. First, the Norwalk new urbanism. So this is, remember the Peninsula neighborhood that we did. We now have a full steering committee. We have representation from the school, from real estate, planning and zoning commission, city council, city staff, and the community, the development community. So we've got a good group. We've already had one meeting. We're starting to settle in on what the goals are going to be for the project. Lindsay's been working on a survey that we're going to send out so that we don't have to have another meeting to get there. So thanks to Ed and Jackie for both being involved. That's been a fun project so far. And the last thing, I wanted to show you all apartment data. I just saw this in the business record. So I snapped a picture of it. Let me show this real quick. I thought this was interesting. One day I had a text from Ed Cool, and he said, why in the heck is Grimes getting 3 high Vs? They must have had some article about how they were going to roll out.
I saw your note down here, but go ahead.
Yeah, I put that right on at your desk. I thought this was interesting to see how many apartments Grimes is adding. I really compared collectively to the metro. What I put on Ed's desk, I actually wrote down the population of each one of the communities, and you can see that Grimes is a very low population for the number of apartments they're adding. And if you haven't driven through that community, I would encourage you to do so. But it's scary. It really is the amount of apartments that are going up. On the flip side, look at the amount of commercial growth that is exploding in the community with all those people coming so fast. So
Not what I want.
Don't take that as me trying to sell, but that was more of just a good response. When somebody compares us to other communities, there's a lot of factors that might identify why we're getting a business or why we're not. That's all I have.
I guess still.
But the use of the
36-letter word.
the use of looking at more intense housing like now with the other project, right? So that would tend to make moves in this direction without necessarily having to add rows and rows of apartments. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're hitting that density level, but doing it in a way that is more appealing for our types of development.
Right.
And that's something that's kind of missing from what you've looked at, is how much land is consumed by those apartment complexes and how many units there are in there, compared to, can you do it in a development style that's more acceptable to our community, but still reaching some of those density levels. And that's kind of what our whole new urbanism project talks about.
Good.
Okay. Brian.
I don't have anything.
All right. Stephanie.
Nothing.
Lindsay.
Just one thing, our code is codified for 2020. So all of the ordinances that you guys passed last year are up and on the website, including the subdivision ordinance. So it'll be much easier to search if you have things you want to look up. That's it.
Awesome. Robin.
Nothing.
Jean Bosch.
Good evening. I just wanted to invite everyone to come to the library and visit us. We are now open without appointments, and it's very exciting. We've had some new to Norwalk families come in and get their library cards, and they're very excited. So we'd love to see you there too.
Awesome.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. Holly.
I forgot to tell you guys, I think I might have mentioned to some of you at one of our department head meetings, but Michael Foods, I did hear from the VP of Michael Foods a couple weeks ago, and he just called to give an update, and he said that they are doing really, really well again, and that they have already started to expand into their third line. So they're in full swing of rehiring and hiring new staff for that third line. So that was really positive to hear that from them. Had an hour-long meeting today with the cobblestone developer, and things are still going really well there for them. They've just had lots of little hurdles to jump, but man, they're patient. And thank you, Luke Paris, for dealing with the DOT on that business, because now they're working on a noise study. So that's their next little hurdle, but they're in it. And there's some bigger things going on out at North Shore coming up. It's pretty exciting. So can't wait to bring that back to you. The last thing would be that Adam Mekis, our design consultant engineer, design person that we had put together the Norwalk Central draft that you all saw. He will be at P&Z this Monday. Is that right, Lou Paris?
Yes, on Monday night. Yep.
Monday. So that's good because that's moving us along into the next step of the process to get moving ahead here with Norwalk Central and the infrastructure and the sports project all kind of in one shot. So that's it.
Cool. Thank you. Gene Kelly.
I do not have a report. Thank you.
Chief Staples.
Nothing other than last week, the night officers caught construction burglar down here at Brody's Landing, Destiny Homes in the act. Arrested the passenger for a warrant out of Polk County. Couldn't get a hold of anybody at Destiny to verify the stuff was stolen. Let the driver go. Verified it the next day. Got warrants for the driver. Turns out that they are wanted for their suspects and lots of other ones from around the metro. Once again, Norwalk solved everybody else's crimes. Go team. That's all I got.
All right. Good deal. Chief Colbert.
We've had a couple of significant fire events during this cold snap, and hats off to my crew for the way that they handled them and the dedication that they had to hang in there during the evening when it wasn't fun to be out there. So they did a great job, and I'd like to thank the council for approving the union contract. I do think that's an important part of growing our department and moving forward, as well as the 2080 agreement and the agreement with Martinsdale. So look forward to moving things forward.
All right. Thank you. Wayne.
Thank you, Mayor. Ed, I'm not sure if you were going to mention it, but we did receive notice this week that our garbage collection rates will be going down this next year. They adjusted it based on CPI, cost of diesel, that kind of thing. It's going down 2 cents a month. So nothing significant, but it's positive that's at least not going up, right? Paul Swift is retiring from Public Works. He's a employee. He's been here 33 years. Next Friday is his last day. So if you see him or reach out to him, please wish him happy retirement and thank him for his years of service. And I probably speak for all of us, but 20 degrees and sunshine today felt great. Never felt better. And we're happy to have a few days off from snow removal.
Yeah.
That's it.
Hey, are we gonna do a little something to recognize Paul then?
You know, Paul's a very, I don't know what the right word for it. He's been pretty adamant. He doesn't want a big to do for his retirement. We did get him a little award that we're going to give him at Public Works. I definitely would love it if you guys could reach out to him though and tell him thank you. He just doesn't want a big celebration in his honor though.
All righty, thank you.
Thanks, Wayne. Ed.
Oh, yeah, well, he gave me the lead. We're saving a little money.
Yeah.
The garbage people are working hard. But next year, what we're going to do is we're going to take a collective approach where we will combine the bid on the contract for picking up yard waste, along with the same company that's going to handle the garbage and recycle. And we think that it'll probably give us a better bid on the yard waste. I could spend a lot of time here and talk about why that is, but I'm not going to. But that's the future that we're headed toward anyway. And I think it'll get us a better deal.
All right. Good deal. Jackie.
So for the first time in Norwalk school history, the Norwalk wrestling team made it to state as a team.
All right.
And actually took 5th in the team duels. So they lost a close one to Southeast Polk. They beat Bettendorf. And then they beat somebody else. I can't remember yet. but anyway, so huge accomplishment. And individual wrestling started today. We had 8 wrestlers go to state and 7 are still alive.
Good.
And after, if you win the first round, you don't have to wrestle till tomorrow. If you lose the first round, then you had to wrestle back today. We had 1 wrestler eliminated and 3 on the front side. So 3 won their first match, 3 lost their first match, but won their second match. 1's eliminated. And as a team right now, Norwalk's in 8th place in the 3A bracket. So yeah, it's a fun and exciting time for Norwalk wrestling.
Good.
Yeah.
Good, good.
You get Southeast Polk.
Yeah, it was, yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, one of the posts that I saw, Norwalk, whatever our school number is, less than 1,200, I think. We were wrestling teams. The next lowest school number of students was 1,700. So.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
impressive.
good stuff.
David.
I just want to thank Wayne and his crew because we've had 50 inches of snow this year, and those guys have done an awesome job of getting it taken care of and moved and taking care. It's nice to drive on streets that don't have big piles of snow and pack on them still. So they've done a great job. So good job, Wayne. Make sure you tell your guys that too. And thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, David. Jim.
Nothing.
Okay. The only thing I have is for Central Iowa Water Trails. Has Jim gotten the 2080 to review?
No.
Okay. So let's do that. Do you guys want
I
that?
haven't received that.
You haven't
2080, no.
received the 2080.
We don't know that we have a complete draft yet.
Okay. So do we want to go ahead and say we want to participate before we see the 2080, or do we want to?
I think in general, even with talking through components of what will be in that 2080, I am absolutely comfortable recommending that we do participate.
Okay, so are you guys okay with bringing that concept to council on the 4th?
Yeah.
To say whether or not we want to participate?
Yes.
And then the next step after that will be the council gets to approve the 2080 or not. So, okay, that sounds good. So let's put that on the 24th, the 4th agenda. Okay, that's all I had. Anybody want to motion to?
Motion.
Want to second it? Okay, I got a motion by Cool, second by Livingston. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those
Maybe
opposed,
Baker would
same.
get on that.
All right, so we are adjourned at 8:56 p.m. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Good night.
Night.